Hmm.
I'll tell the guards to let him in.
Mhm. So did you start the stream? Okay. Oh.
Yeah, but wait to contact him and tell him he can come. Sorry. If you want David further to come.
All right.
He was planning to be around.
Yeah, well, you never know. But... Yep. It's moving.
If you never know what we're on.
So, if you see the AB guys,
Yeah.
I'm
sure they have another mic.
They have.
They have.
They get with another. So can you put the link in the program? But
I can put the link in on the website. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can do that.
Hey, what you put it?
Send me the YouTube link and I'll put it in.
Do you hear me, Peter? Do you hear me all?
Where was that?
Ben, I can hear you. I cannot yet see you. You need to start your camera.
I start my camera, video.
Don't hear you yet.
There you
Okay,
go.
so I'm here.
Hello, everyone.
Watch here. Hello. Can you see the presentation? I have to share it. Huh?
Not yet.
Just a sec. Let's just set up sound.
I also need the YouTube link before we start talking.
You need to make us host first. You need to make us host first. And that's how we can share the screen.
Okay.
Later?
Yeah.
Can you make the presentation with Ben in it host?
I can also set it up and then you can...
Ja, maar ik zal jou ook host maken.
Oké.
Ik wil het doen,
Oké.
maar als ik nu even jou... zo, nu ben jij host.
Kunnen meer mensen host zijn? Multiple participants can share simultaneously, okay?
Ja. Ja, zo, ik hou hem gewoon live hier. En jij kan gewoon... hij is... Zoom is recording to the cloud. And the live stream YouTube is also there.
Okay, Ben, are you host? Can you?
Am I host, Fabio? No.
Try to share.
Not yet.
Okay, I try to share. Host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Okay, I've moved host to you.
I'm host now. I see. I share and desktop too. Okay.
Very good. All right.
Yep.
Okay, so you see it.
There's
good.
that. This is working.
Okay, I'm changing the pictures just to have to see if it works. You can see
that link.
You can from here.
This one?
No, the other, the arrow. And then you can. Is that one? You can just.
Okay, we see the pictures. It looks good. I don't see myself, so I don't see my little title appear.
Moment. Dit is de YouTube link.
Waar post je die?
In jouw in de messages. En die gaat Karel online zetten in het programma.
Oké. Ik deel hem ook even hier.
Maar mensen kunnen ook gewoon inloggen met de YouTube link of met de Zoom link. Maar dat maakt op zich niet zoveel uit. We hebben toch niet zo heel erg feedback sessies.
En Type Social gaat hij ook naartoe.
Ja, dat kan. Je kan hem overal posten. Maar we recorden dus de Zoom direct op iCloud. En,
Ja.
dus daar, hebben we daar kan ik je gewoon een linkje van sturen. Dus hoef ik hem niet te uploaden.
Ja,
Dus als ze sluiten, dan wordt dat een linkje. En dan kan je hem daar gewoon vandaan halen. En dan moet je dit er even afknippen, want we zijn ook al begonnen.
yep.
Het is nog niet zoveel audience nu, maar het is ook niet zo erg, denk ik. Hij blijft gewoon staan.
Ja, heel goed. Ja, 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 oké.
Ja.
Teams. Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck. Wait here, no problem.
We hebben nog 10 minuten.
Ja.
Waarom ben ik niet in beeld als ik praat?
Je kan dat hangt ervan of je het meeste geluid maakt. Maar je kan als host ook iemand pinnen, dat hij blijft staan daar.
Maar ik ben geen host meer.
Dan moet de Fabio computer dat even doen. Ik kan reclaim host doen.
Daar ben ik.
Dus is een grote scherm. Dat ik doe met het achtergrondje, als ik hem aan heb staan. Dan is het in beeld, maar dan plak ik hem dus even af en dan ziet hij geen beeld en dan laat hij alleen de achtergrond zien.
Dat heb ik allemaal klaarstaan, maar ik verschijn niet in beeld nu.
Ja, in het klein. Dus je
Zie je
ziet,
mij wel?
ik zie jou, ja. In de dinges.
Oké, want ik heb ook een sticky en dan doe ik dit.
Ja, precies.
Ja.
Ja.
En dan...
Maar je kan bij de participants, dus moet je even kijken die kan je groter en kleiner zetten.
It seems.
Can't carry them, so.
Yes,
Even kijken,
ja.
waar is het thuis?
Hoe doe ik heb chat en pin. Dat zijn de opties.
Do you mind if I sit here?
No, it's cool.
I'm just kind of.
Nee, maar je ziet de onderbalk, participants.
cool.
Ja,
Die moet je
dan
dan
krijg ik een klein
boven.
windowtje.
Ja. En dan heb je daar, zie je iedereen staan. En dan kan je daar jouw achtergrond even inzetten, parallel. Er zijn nu drie mensen.
Zullen we laten zien hoe het windowtje eruit ziet bij mij.
Nee, dat is een invite. Even kijken hoor.
Dat is waar ik terecht kom bij Zoom participants.
Ja. Nee, maar als het goed is zie je in jouw scherm bovenin, maar die kan je op verschillende plekken neerzetten, geloof ik. De... Kan je chat aanzetten? Dan zie je...
You are chatting as a guest. Ben or Fabio, if you can hear me, can you
Yes.
Mute the video for a moment?
Yes, I don't know where is that. How to mute?
Bottom left,
Bottom
something
right.
with a video
Okay,
icon.
I mute.
No, that's just your audio. Dus if there's a way to...
You want to mute me to mute the video also?
Yeah, just to see if that works.
Okay. Does it work?
Okay,
Yeah.
you change into Fabio, but then your screen sharing is still on. Okay, I'll just talk and then there's no need.
Maar ik kan het ook doen.
Doe jij het? Dat is goed.
Even kijken, dan even de volgorde weten. Maar
We beginnen met Ben.
Jen,
Ben.
how can you make this larger? Okay.
Make what larger? Sorry.
No, I'm
No,
Ah,
different
sorry.
talking to
Ben.
Jen.
A different bin. Okay.
Oh, there. Yeah. Ja.
And this only way.
Ja. Bovenin heb je view staan. Rechtsboven. Pop-up.
Rechtsboven, view. Oh, daar, ja.
En dan kan je kiezen side-by-side speaker, side-by-side gallery.
Ja, oké.
Ik heb side-by-side gallery, dan heb je ze op de rechterkant zitten.
Oké, nu zie ik hem. Heel goed.
En die kan,
Oké.
die kan je verschuiven, dat ze groter worden en kleiner worden, maar dat is dan alleen maar lokaal.
Right. Oké, dankjewel. Dat is hem.
Ja.
All right, Ben, you can switch your camera back on.
Okay.
Very good.
It still
Now,
work?
you know the camera it's the camera on your
Here.
right, that one.
Yes, I know.
That's what
Yes.
that's the one that's recording.
You can
That's the one
still
we will
see
see.
my screen, my screen sharing.
Absolutely. Yep. Screen
Perfect.
sharing on. Screen sharing is on.
Perfect.
This is me. That's Peter. And we have 5 minutes to go. I will send Peter the list. Peter, the first 3 presenters are on PDF, and that's what we're using this window for.
Yeah.
And after that, it will be Keynote, and we need to make a small switch with the camera, so it's going to go different.
All right.
We
Well,
needed
I'll put them in my background too. So
yeah. And then I think now I should also be able to do this. Look at that, Ben.
yeah.
That's all for you. See?
Nice. Perfect. Can you put Benjamin actually?
Really?
If it's possible.
That will take 2
No.
minutes.
No, but it's okay. It's okay. No.
This
I
was
don't-
the list. This was the list I had, but
No, but it's okay. Keep it like that. It's all right. It's
Sorry.
just Benny. It's my nickname, but it's okay. I think it's good
Sorry.
enough for TypeMedia. No, but it's all right. If you have no time, it's okay.
Very good. Very happy that we can join. So this is on the Europe channel, and we are the only people in the Europe channel.
Okay.
right now, but it will be shared online as a link in the YouTube channel.
And they're supposed to watch the latest class of TypeMedia students presented typeface design graduate and projects hosted by hosted by Peter. Or me. Very good.
Yeah, go ahead if you.
All right. Anybody signing up yet? But the whole classroom is quiet at the moment. They are hard at work. They all deliver their presentations while they were also still working on their anchors and stems.
Yeah, well, you
I
can't
mean,
signing up.
hinting.
We only see for Zoom, but we don't see who signs up for the
YouTubes.
the YouTubes. You can
That's true.
see that in a different way.
So
Oh, there's
next week we have we
There are
have the
nine.
exams.
There are 9 people right now in YouTube.
Cool.
Yeah.
Welcome. Welcome, viewers. We're broadcasting almost live from The Hague. It's almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon here. We have 13 presentations coming up. Very eager students who would like to show their work. The projects they've been working on at TypeMedia this year. I don't know how the broadcast has already started then, or does it start at 3?
Yeah.
It's one of those time things. It's already started.
It already started.
Very good.
Yeah.
My name is Erik van Blokland. I'm the head of the TypeMedia department at the Royal Academy of Arts in The Hague. We're the one-year master. This year we have 13 very eager graduates, almost graduates. They're doing their exam next week. The work you're seeing is brand new. And we're looking forward to these presentations. I want to thank Cooper Union, Type at Cooper, Cara Di Eduardo, and the whole crew there for having us over. Here is me. And allowing to present us on this platform. We love typographics, we love TypeLab, and unfortunately, every year it coincides with the TypeMedia exams, and it's always so difficult to see all the fun and the amazing presentations that are going on there, and then we can never join. So if you could do it 2 weeks later, or about a month earlier, all of it would be amazing. Anyway, I think we should just get started. The first presenter, Benjamin Rousseau from France. You will be able to see the slide already. It says hello. Benjamin, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Hello, Eric. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks, TypeLab. Thanks, Typographic, for welcoming us. I present myself. I'm Benjamin Rousseau. As you might hear it, I come from France. I'm a type and graphic designer. And my thing is writing, and writing by any means, no matter the tool, no matter where, and no matter the size, sure. So first picture you can see, for example, drawing with tape, second one with brush, and the last one with spray can, for example. But I have to say that my favorite tool is the big pen. It's something that I can do endless. And I do this by looking as less as possible at existing models. And that allows me to have some unusual placement regarding the thicknesses in the strokes. And I'm showing this because this will lead my research from the last 4 months since February here in TypeMedia. And this concerns this problematic that I have, that is calligraphy, how it interacts with in the type design process. So first, the concern is to put the stroke in the software, and to explore how far I can go outside of the 1000 M units. So you can see that I can easily go to 10,000 units, but at some point, for example, for 10,000, I can't generate the font. But this show me some problems, like if I want to compose then with those swashes at the beginning of the page, the swashes get lost outside of the frame, and it's something that we don't want for this kind of ornaments. So I come back to references. So this is a bit of type history, looking at the first cursive by Niccolo Niccoli, then the first punch cut italic when it gets systematized. And you can see an improvement after that, from example here with Arrighi in La Operina. And furthermore, regarding the swashes and those ornaments, you can see from Maya's trick work that there is a clear distinction between the swashes and the writing calligraphic system, if I can say, that there is two distinct things. So swashes are one thing and the writing another. Then I was looking that way after there is an improvement in the type design by trying to imitate this beautiful writing, which is the definition of calligraphy, and see how far people went into it, like with the Zapfino, like Bicam, certain level of aesthetical choices and an important amount of alternates in the glyphs. Then with something more simple here, a little bit more. Here, I like this picture on the left because it shows that we never sure how people will use it with all this amount of alternates. So it creates this kind of surprises. And then after, it's a matter of taste, if you like it or not. But actually, it's not the exact rule. And then I try to see how it was possible to simplify or to systematize writing. And here, this is a strikingly simple way to simplify a casual writing. So the Mistral, a very famous one, with those connections that are in the middle of the M stem, and everything can happen in between. It can work in any situation. And you can see that it's possible to set it with metal types. So I went to my writings, tried to understand what I can do with it, how I can systematize it, trying to figure out connections, trying to see how I can look the capitals, anticipate maybe some ligatures or appearances of swashes. So I start with something as simple as possible, with not connected letter that shows here more a skeleton approach to help me to add things on it and understand already how a system can look from that. So first interpretation, you can see that it changed the flavor of the calligraphy. There is some inconsistencies regarding the thicknesses in the strokes, so that I try to push, maybe not connecting them and push even further by making something more stencil. But this, I didn't really like it because it was too far from the idea of the calligraphic path of the stroke. So this is the first digitization by keeping a certain thickness, trying to be as consistent as possible, but you can see that in the endings regarding roundness and pointiness, there is some things going on that I have to explore more. And of course, this is digitization, so it's systematized, and you can see how much the flavor get lost from the calligraphy. So from there, I see that the interpretation is unavoidable, and I have to focus on the system. Talking about the system, I'm questioning, so which size I want to draw a typeface from the calligraphy, and also what will be the potential space design regarding thin to bold. So I write with the same tool, with the big pen, smaller and smaller. And you can see that I can get this range of weights. And look at what happened here. More I'm writing small, the more the typeface is getting thick and wider. From there, I had an interrogation on what does it mean that if I'm working on different sizes, that I have different kind of application. So from display through text to caption. And you see all three completely different interpretations that I can have from a writing. My interest is the calligraphy. So I focus on this idea of maybe connecting the letters to keep as much as possible flavor. And the size is aimed for 24 points, I forgot to say. But you can see that in the ending, I lose some natural feeling of the gesture. And it creates some ambiguous way also to read at letters, and it's not really legible. And this is something that I discovered, that with the calligraphy, I emphasize aesthetic, which in the type design, I'm here looking to emphasize readability. So with the text, I see that it works better with this idea of something, running writing. And with the caption, it works even better, but here, still, I'm going away from this calligraphic idea. So I drew this, that is an in-between of the display and the text. I slant it a bit more, and to talk about the construction, it's a matter of pressure in my writing, and here I determine 3 levels of thickness. So there is words example here, and you can see that in the contrast, there are still things that are not clear. I have so many information, especially regarding the connections, regarding the thin parts. And so I try to harmonize that by doing this. Then looking at the endings and the drops. So I have some thickness, sometimes it's pointy. So I try to put them more pointy, to put everything pointy, to see how coherent it can be. And make this as thin as possible also to increase the contrast, so to make thin thinner and thick thicker. And trying in bold how it can look like. So at the end, I have all this range. And I think in all you see here, it's a matter of tastes. And what I decided to choose is those one, to work on a system that can suggest a certain hierarchy between thin and thick. Regular and bold styles. So in this bold, it's the first draft. So you can see it's sensibly similar, but a lot of things are going on. So I try to stay closer, especially in the curves. If you look at the end, for example, it gets more tense, and try to get closer to the regular. But still, when you look at those parts here in the bold, it's something that changed still from the regular. So I try to interpolate, see what's going on in between. And when I was thinking of the research that I did with the writing, with different size of writing, I see that this one helps me to understand that this bold may be more helpful to have something that works better with the regular. So to come back to the regular and these endings, it should be the same as the connection. So because when you see in the bold, or everything is uniform in that sense. So this is what I end by making the ending as thick as the connection and trying to fit the ball in that sense by making the thin a little bit thicker also. Now I want to talk about the capitals, which is the identity, what should be the identity of the typeface, because this realm of the capitals talks really about the gesture and about the spectacular shapes. So there is a sketch over the capitals, so you can see the idea of the pressure in the strokes. Here is an evolution over the caps. So the idea is to keep the craziness, if I want to say, and trying to keep it as simple, but preserving this swashiness in the caps. Here, another example with H and O. So you see that I try really to be as simple as possible, but not that much. Then, looking at the capitals, how it works. If you look at the first line, especially the capital A, the swash on the right part doesn't help the legibility. So it's why on the second line, I try to simplify it. Like this, it can continue with the lowercase after. So there is 2 parts in the capital. The left one that is swashy and the right one that should fit with the rest of the lower cases. For the E, for example, I can keep it like that because the swash on top close like a box that lead me to keep this in this space. Here is an overview with the lower cases. There is a lot of things going on still in terms of contrast, thicknesses, and in in the strokes, but I think it works quite okay for now. Then the idea is to do a bold from those swashy capitals. And this is a very big challenge because what should I do? So as you can see with the A, which is one of the most complicated letters because of many information in such a small space, I try to keep the thinnest strokes as thin as the N, for example, but I'm losing weight and there is some complex element with those ink trapped that are appearing right now. So I have this explanation and I think I should find a balance between the middle one and the last one below. So for now, I have this glyph set for the regular, so a standard one with some ligatures, figures, punctuation, and diacritics. I didn't show the diacritics now for the capitals because it's not super steady yet. And for the bold, I still have a lot to do. So thank you for hearing my presentation. And I let now the place to my camera. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Hana Boso, who will join us. While you are there and while you are the host, can you see if there are any people that want to be let in the participants list? Hana, can you hear me? Hi, Hana, can you hear me?
Hi, Eric. Yes, I hear you perfectly. Do you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Before you start, can you have a look at the participants list and see if there's anybody who wants to be let in?
I don't see anything, no.
No, all right. Then we will start, Hana Boso.
Oh, now someone is waiting. Sorry.
Now is somebody waiting?
Okay, let them in. Yep.
Yep, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks TypeLab for having us. I'm Hana and I will be as well talking about my graduation project here at TypeMedia. My work is all about italics, both the left and the right leaning kind. And yeah, my attempt to find balance. First, just a few words about my life before TypeMedia. I studied graphic design, and that is where I discovered my fascination for type. And next to that, I was a graphic designer and a typography teacher, and also I spent part of my time on environmental activism. And in a larger sense, my graduation project at TypeMedia was also about environment. The idea for the thesis came to me when I was watching the ships on the North Sea here in Scheveningen at the beach being pushed around by the waves to the left and to the right. And I wanted to incorporate this concept of balance into my project. Yeah, this is how I got into italics. I was especially fascinated with the weirder sibling of the italic family, which is the left-leaning italics. The idea I had was to design a serif family for body text that includes two italics, so one leaning to the left and one to the right, while treating them as equals. I started with doing a lot of research on what has been out there, on historic backgrounds. Yeah, I found that the left-leaning italic is not so common, of course. Here are two great Renaissance examples. And somewhere deep into the rabbit hole, I stumbled upon a really great ATA-Pi talk by fellow type designer and researcher Jo de Baardemaker, where he refers to examples in 19th century advertising and also maps. I happen to have been collecting maps for years, just like other normal things that type designers do. So I was very excited to find a lot of left-leaning italics in my mostly German map collection from the past 2 centuries, around 150 years. The reverse italics or left-leaning italics were used to mark hydrographics, as you see here. That means any kind of water, lakes, rivers, oceans. I found different forms of left-leaning typefaces, of which the last group, reverse cursives or left-leaning cursives, seemed the most interesting to me. Also, just because there's not really anything out there in that category. I continued to practice a lot of italic cursive writing and made several drafts for the family to figure out what could be a good construction. And in order to find the proper contrast throughout the family, I expanded some existing theories, such as the contrast model of our beloved Gerrit Noordzij. And in the end, I came up with my own construction model that I called the bookshelf principle. Essentially, it is about rotating the whole letter and then letting it slide back into place onto the baseline. And you can see it here. I continue to work with one of my designs that also follows the bookshelf principle. And here is one of the first drafts. It got a thumbs up. Yeah, there was a lot of work to do, obviously, such as adjusting proportions and other inconsistencies, you name it. And the ambitious goal was that both of the italics should attract the same amount of attention within the text. One of the biggest discoveries in the process was that the same angle to the left seems steeper than to the right. You see it here. I had to adjust it. Just because Latin native readers' eyes are just less used to it, and then the left-leaning angle draws more attention. So I had to adjust that. That is why there's a difference now in 2 degrees between the 2 italics. And another big decision was about the weight. That was solved through interpolating towards a heavier second master from where I started out. And I decided in the end for somewhere in the middle towards the heavier weight to support readability, also in smaller text. And yeah, to just make it more readable overall. Later in the process, you saw it in the design space from the beginning, I started on the design of a complementary reverse italic display style that could work for headlines or, yeah, just any kind of titling. And this is the first draft, which was soon dropped in order to return to the initial inspiration of historic maps. This is a wonderful map print from 1584. Everything right-leaning, though. I was aiming for these beautiful, elaborately swashed caps. And then I had the idea of designing several stylistic sets for them, so they could just be used interchangeably. And now there are swashy caps for the beginning, the middle, and the end of a word or a line, taking different kinds of space. And they serve as an extra to the normal capital letters that you can see here. At the very end of the project, I was also excited to enter the world of kerning, which was a first to me, I have to admit. But yes, it works. After all, it was pretty clear that the perfect name for the typeface, was that was going in all these directions was Compass. It's the Dutch spelling because it was also designed here. And it consists of 4 styles now with 3 text styles plus the reverse italic display style. It supports most European languages in all the text styles. And the typeface was initially designed as a body text typeface, so for books, magazines, and so on. But I personally like to use the italic styles also in a display surrounding. I always think it's fun to make text typefaces that have a little bit of quirk or some details that show up when you make it bigger. Yeah, so I used it, for example, for the poster on the left. And mainly the text styles are meant to be supported with the display style for, yeah, as I said, titles, heading, and so on, such as in the right poster. Yeah, what's next? I'm planning to continue working on the typeface, and it would be great to expand the family in weights, as I initially planned. And it would also be awesome having a right-leaning display italic. And yeah, next to that, I will just continue freelancing as a type and graphic designer. That's it. Thank you very much. I will hand over to the next person that should be here.
Felix. Go.
We have to find him.
Felix is on his way. Thank you, Hana.
There he is. Thank you, Erik. I will hand it over to Felix now.
Fabio.
One list is number
Is hier klein?
Deine sollte.
Oops.
Hi, Felix.
Hello. Just finding the full screen. Here and the full screen. Okay. Yes, I'm ready.
And it's the camera on the right. It's got the little sticky pointing to it.
Oh yes. Hello.
Welcome, Felix.
Thank you. Should I get started right away?
Absolutely.
Okay. So hello everyone. I'm going to talk about my project Aerograph and talk a little bit about my experience at TypeMedia and how this project came together. If anybody wants to talk after, feel free to contact me at that handle on Instagram. I'd be happy to take any criticism or answer any questions. So please get in touch. So this is us, beginning of the year, all looking very happy. Most of us having a different haircut, actually. This is me with my cheeky classmates, Fabio, Ando, and of course, Spij. And so just about me, I'm a German Scotsman who grew up in France. This is food from each of these cultures. Sorry, Scotland. And my first contact with letters was at the tender age of 15 when I discovered graffiti and when my days were basically filled with thinking of how I could design large letters on walls in a lot of color. I really was into the whole hip hop subculture, and there were a lot of things about it that I liked, like the do-it-yourself aspect, the idea of sampling in music, that you could take an old song and reframe it in a new way, that you could develop your own style, compete with it, and invent new stories. Then I had to accept that my hip hop career wouldn't take off, and I went on to other things, including studies in Berlin, where I basically discovered my first big passion, which was creative coding. And then I got back to letters and did some different type design projects, some on walls and some actual fonts. So that was just a little background story about me. So now on to TypeMedia. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the first semester because the revival we did really resonated with me. I thought the research was super interesting, and I put a lot of work into the actual publication, making this book with an intricate layout, little pages that you could unfold showing the research material. And that was a lot of fun. So I discovered that bookmaking was also really interesting, and I made a similar publication for my contrast assignment, kind of Japanese bound calendar type specimen, you could call it. The coding class with Just was amazing for me because I could finally put all the things that I've been learning on the side into action and into letters. So everything kind of came together, and that was super, super interesting. So then the second semester began. So I'm just making a jump directly into the final project, basically. And what I did to get started with this was to just make a bunch of really bad sketches. The idea behind that being that I wanted to explore a maximum of avenues in order to feel like I wouldn't miss something. And I just, without thinking too much, generated all these sketches, which I then printed out, put in a notebook, and started analyzing and sketching next to them to see which direction might have some potential. The whole creative coding thing, the whole coding letters thing was still there, and I wanted to take some of the first semester ideas and see if that could actually become a final project. So I made some sketches for that as well. And then was the kickoff presentation, and the main feedback that resonated with me is that I kind of jumped into producing very quickly, and that it might make sense to go back to sketching properly and to really looking at ideas more carefully and taking my time. So I did that, and I spent a lot of time trying out different sketching methods. So there was some influences by Cyrus Highsmith. Looking at how Excoffon did his work was also super interesting, and I just tried stuff out. These two sketches basically hold the two main ideas I've been exploring all along the final project. One being a kind of simple, friendly sans serif, and the other one a very experimental, an experiment focused on shapes more than actual, let's say, conventional type design. I did a break in Berlin where I found this little facsimile that was a manual for sign painting. And what I really liked about that was the simplicity of what the writer was trying to teach the user. And there were some concepts that I really liked. I also looked at specimen books in the Technic Museum and rediscovered some of Bertholdt's classics, including the block here, where I just really rediscovered a love for the simplicity and this impact at the same time. So that became a source of inspiration for the things I did after. And then upon coming back to The Hague, I thought it'd be good to try out some really refined sketching, the kind of sketching that we learned in the contrast assignment. So I did these big A3 sheets with a 5 centimeter X height and really tried to make things cleaner. And out of that came the first digital sketches for a sans serif. Something playful, simple, and where I was trying to find the character more in subtlety than in broad strokes. I made some different versions. This one is probably my favorite one, and it also became a base for what I did later. But I also tried different avenues, looking a little bit into weight and into width. And parallel to that, I tried this kind of formal exploration that I mentioned earlier, where I was just trying to see how shapes, or the black and the white shapes, could interact, and what kind of forms could come out of that. So I digitized this. This was a first attempt, just looking at how weight and width could look, and then I made a new sketch and a new attempt just to see what else I could get out of there. I also added more glyphs to see if the texture could be useful, and then I was really tinkering with sketching, and one big step I made at this point was to readjust my sketching approach. And I thought doing this very refined method takes a lot of time, And what seemed more natural to me at this point was to use sketching like a thinking method. So here I was really trying to see how I could draw counter shapes and get interesting letters out of that, which then resulted in these first digital sketches and these two variations. When I presented all of this material, the main feedback I got was that the sketches were good, but that it might be time to start focusing on one direction. And that was an important feedback for me, because I was kind of getting lost a little bit in the comfort of just drawing on paper, and that I needed to see how one idea would actually develop in several styles. Paired with that was maybe a week later when we went to Berlin, and we got some amazing input from different great type designers from the Berlin type scene. And collecting all of this feedback and then coming back to The Hague, I started focusing on one idea. And this idea was the simple sans serif that I started in the beginning, but with some very script influenced shapes. This was probably one of the first sketches, and I started expanding on this, looking at how it could look in text and how it could look in a more display setting. And the idea was to really combine Roman and script letters. I developed the uppercases, made a bold weight, just to have more material to really be able to talk about and to judge it. And one of the big challenges was to really find harmony between the script letters and the Roman letters, because the script ones just demanded a lot of attention and needed a lot of focus to harmonize with the rest. Although I told myself that I would focus on one direction, I couldn't get this experimental route out of my head. And when I was in Berlin, I had this idea for a typeface that would be built out of one shape, but that overlaps, creating negative spaces. And again, this was a really interesting route, and I think it's something that might have potential for later. But again, with these experimental routes, it gave me the impression that it doesn't translate so well into a wider, broader family concept, and that is very idiosyncratic. So presenting all of that, I felt like I got a thumbs up with for the swashy idea. And I took maybe a week just to do a bit of exploration, because I knew the end now was near and that we would have to work a lot. So I had a color font sketch that Just provided me with, and I wanted to see if I could actually put some color into my font. So I did that. But the most important thing was to make this step here. So I took my swashy letters, and I was at the point where I wanted to see what other styles could look like. So I had to make a pretty big decision, which was to get rid of everything that was too tricky and too time-consuming to explore other routes. So I cut it down into a much more simplified 3-dimensional design space with a light narrow, light wide, and bold narrow sources at the core of it. They look like this. And one decision I had to make at that point was, I know there's a lot going on in this typeface that needs to be fixed, but if I want to keep exploring, I need to commit on it now, and then I will have to fix things later, which now that I'm tidying up my typeface, I wish I would have had a bit more time to actually fix this. But anyway, it was a really important learning. And I made more or less 4 or 5 directions out of this. The first one, something that I would call a text version. I wrote different scripts to change the verticals, to create small caps, and to make a rotalic. This here has 4 styles, so it has a regular, a rotalic, a bold, and a bold rotalic. And then I wanted to have something in between text and display, which I call the titling style. It's quite close to the core sources that I showed just now. And it also has 4 styles. And a lot of tidying up happened between the core sources and this one. Then the third grade, basically, of the core sources is this display style, which I only had this really slim version in the beginning. And what's characteristical about this is a very, very large X height and caps that go below the baseline to really fill the space vertically as much as possible. Then we had a feedback session with Paul Barnes, who challenged me to make a really, really bold version, which you can see on the right. And that gave a new dimension to my project, which actually, now that I look at it now, it was a very, very important step. One exploration I also wanted to do, it's an idea I had in my head for a while, was to see if I could actually produce a font that, when used in InDesign, would start writing horizontally up or down. And I took apart some files of the Arabic workshop where the font goes downwards. And I took the OpenType features that allowed me to do this, and I produced that. But looking at it more and more and getting feedback also from other people, I realized that it didn't fit so well into the project. So I had to get rid of this. And then the other idea I wanted to explore was this color concept that I mentioned in the beginning of this part, where I just tried out different colors, and I wanted to see if that kind of could work as well. So that's a kind of work in progress thing. I haven't pushed this more, but yeah, I'll get on to the last phase, which was basically the phase where we had to start wrapping everything up, and that was a lot of work. Basically, I still have to do this, and I'm still doing this, but it's refining. There's so much stuff that can still be improved in the different styles that I have. What I was able to do by making the different styles compatible in each group, so in the text, titling, and the display one, what I was able to do by making them compatible was to extract new weights that were useful when I was doing the graphic design part of the project. So this medium and medium rotalic one were really useful, and I made a bold rotalic for the text that was missing. I made some ornaments that were generated with a script and are more or less random, but give also another dimension in terms of graphic design to the project, which was a lot of fun to include. And talking about graphic design, I went back to Drawbot, and I really wanted to have a concept that was thought through, that had a color system, and also had a visual aesthetic that's thought through. So these are some of the examples I made with codes. Some inspiration coming from Studio Dumbar here as well, but just having this kind of code aesthetic in there was important to me. So I'm just going to show you a couple of slides now that I took out of my specimen to show the typeface more or less in action. A lot is not current yet, so forgive me for that. But this is the text face with the 4 styles being used here, a close-up of the coding experiments. Then the titling style, which would look like this. Again, the ribby concept put into action. And then finally the display one, which does a really nice job here, and shows also the 5 styles that I was able to interpolate and get out of the different experiments I made. The color font that I was working on became this, so no more color, but I refined the shapes a little bit, and it's a nice addition because it's also a display style, but it's much wider, and looking at it in comparison to the other ones gives this extra note, which is really, really nice. So this is it for me. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and I'll be at the Berlin Letters with a couple of friends in a couple of weeks, so I'd be happy to hand out some specimen and talk about the project if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. Oh, wonderful stuff. Fabio is going to come in and switch the presentations around. Cheers.
Hey, 1 second.
And then coming up is Betsy Twister.
Okay. Is this okay, Eric? Eric?
Yes, I can see it and it looks fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'll give it to Betsy.
Thank you, Fabio. Welcome, Betsy.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Betsy, and I'm excited to show you the process of my final project for TypeMedia. So before we get into all of that, I wanted to quickly show y'all just what I've been up to. So in the first semester, I focused a lot on doing things more conventionally. So for my contrast assignment, I wanted to follow conventional models as much as possible. So I had the regular contrast, the low contrast, and also the high contrast black weight. And I also had a very conservative italic as well. And for my revival project, I chose a Fraktur typeface. And it was super interesting and really challenging to work on. And it included a whole new set of capitals, as well as a stylistic set with the original construction. So when I thought about what I should do for my final project, considering I had done everything by the books in the first semester, I decided to go crazy. Because why not? Because when else am I going to have the opportunity to spend months on a personal project without any worry about it being marketable? So that leads to part one, the kickoff presentation. My first idea revolved around representing abject art typographically or making type in poor taste. So I wanted to go just completely wild with bitmap color fonts and stretching and distortion. And I wanted to draw like a black letter with a pointed nib contrast. And all around, I was just thinking about how to make things ugly and offensive. But after the presentation, I took a step back and I realized that I didn't really want to make type in poor taste. I was really just more interested in typographic extremes. So this leads into part two of my project where I focused on exploration. I started here with a pointed nib inspired, very loopy, flourishy concept. And I immediately started thinking about how I could push this further into a hairline and a bold style with a forward and back movement. And I really liked what was happening here. So I did a rough sketch of the rest of the lowercase. And rather than refining this further, I decided to go more lo-fi with it because I knew that I wanted to try interpolation and extrapolation. So here's the lowercase all digitized, which went really quickly because it's all just straight lines. And there was also this exploration because I wanted to create a big contrast between the styles. So a monoline made sense. And this is how the process went for adding more styles. So I skewed the type that I had. I sketched on top of it to make adjustments and corrections. And then I drew over that with just straight lines. So I was able to very quickly visualize the ideas in my head and get a broad sense of what the family could look like. And things were starting to get really just goofy and fun. So this is the range of interpolations and extrapolations I was doing. So things, of course, start to get really crunchy at the margins, but it was still super useful to see. And I also noticed that if I took the most extreme backslanted italic and I turned it 90 degrees, it got a little more legible. So I took note of that. And then I sketched on top of it, thinking about like a pointed nib contrast, so the weight just being on the downstrokes. And that led to this sketch, which was starting to turn into something kind of cool. And this was still very early on in the process, but I could start to see how this could evolve. Another detour I took is into the bitmap color fonts, which I sadly didn't end up using in the end, but it was too cool to not share. So I was able to make these just super extreme visuals that are completely arresting, although totally illegible. But the outcome of all this exploring was this super broad design space. This isn't like even everything I tried to do, but it was just an overwhelming amount. And that's why the third part of my project was titled Focus. So I took some time, I took a step back, and I thought, what is the project? What am I doing here? So this is when I finalized the project brief for myself. So I decided that Antiphony is an exercise in extremity, excess, and developing continuity through opposing styles. So I focused my plan design space. I wanted to create contrasts with optical sizes, weight, and the forward and reverse italics. And the first thing that I did was I drew a slightly lower contrast version of the reverse italic that I had before. And then I sketched a forward italic to pair with it. I also started looking at ideas for the capitals. So I wanted to bring a black letter influence into the project. So I looked at Suderland, which is fracture handwriting, essentially. And what's so cool about it is that all the loops, like if you look at the uppercase A, it has that looped construction at the top. So that's something that I brought into my sketches and I included in some other caps. So this was my plan for the family, to really just go to the most extreme in each style. Then I looked at my whole planned design space, and remember when I said this part was supposed to be about focusing my project? Well, I'll get there, I promise. So the biggest issue at this moment was that I looked at the boldest bold next to the lightest light, and there wasn't a strong enough connection there. So the pair wasn't working, and I had to rethink something. So what I did is I redrew the bold styles with more of like a flexible flat brush in mind. And this made the styles harmonize a lot better in my view. So I went back to sketches because I wanted to think about how this would work in the rest of the caps. Like how can I introduce that loop construction in a way that makes sense and doesn't feel too forced? I started this style as well because I noticed that the display styles and the text were too far apart. And at the time, I was working on a text style as well. And looking at this overall design space, I was really happy with how this was looking. So I started to digitize one of the display styles. And this was super helpful in spotting the issues going on with the weight and the construction. And then I digitized the first draft of the heading styles. And now I want to circle back to how I was justifying where the thicks and thins were going. So this is the model that I made for myself, thinking about a pointed nib pen. The heaviest the stroke can be is holding the pen straight down, and the upstrokes are always light, right? So if I apply this logic to my letters, I can create the consistency in the contrast. And because the forward italic, when I drew it, is rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise, and the reverse italic is rotated 90 degrees clockwise, it creates this like reversed contrast effect between them. I also applied it to this style, which I was calling the heading style, and this was drawn at a less steep angle, giving it the appearance of a broad nib contrast. After digitizing the reverse italic, this is how the styles were looking together. And then I digitized the bold reverse italic with that kind of brushy style. And I was liking how the styles were starting to work together. But at this point, I was having second thoughts about all of these serifs going on. So as a test, I removed most of them, which was definitely the right move. The letters were already super complex, so adding serifs really only made things less legible. Now, at this point, I was starting to look at the calendar and I got a bit nervous. So I hunkered down and I started drawing a lot. So the first thing that happened was that I abandoned all of the textiles, which I haven't talked about a lot because I abandoned them. They became too conventional for the family and it would require a ton of reworking. But thankfully, I still had the display black contra italic, the display light contra italic, the display light italic, the display black italic, which I hadn't drawn yet, the heading bold contra italic, and the heading regular contra italic. And if anybody has ideas for flashier names, please DM me. So here are some changes that I made. So first, the heading style. I made it much more fluid to pair it more nicely with the other heading style, as well as the display styles. And I drew the lowercase for that. I also made some refinements to the regular heading style. I made the contrast a bit more upright, and I refined some proportions. Now here's some sketches for the display contra italic, refined sketches, and the digitization. So the loops were a topic of discussion throughout my project. So I made a test showing the difference between a full loop, a little bit of a loop, and taking them completely out. And at this moment, I decided to keep them, but I will come back to this later. I sketched the caps for the contra italic. They were really tricky to get looking right, but I digitized a first draft. Then I drew the forward italic, and one of the big challenges of this project was getting the overall image of the contrast and the weight to match between the forward and the contra italics, because they are this opposite contrast due to the process of drawing them. Here are the sketches for the forward italic caps and the first draft of the digitized capitals. And here were the display black styles. They ended up being more of a bold, but that's okay. My initial sketches ended up not being slanted enough to pair with the light counterparts, so I adjusted that in post. And this is the family overview as of May 16th, where I got some great feedback during a critique from Paul Barnes. So here are some of the problem characters that were mentioned. The loops were an issue. They were too distracting, affecting legibility and overall not doing the typeface a lot of favors. There was also the proportions of the capitals were a bit funky. So after the crit, I started to address some of the concerns. I adjusted the proportions of some caps. I decided to remove some, but not all of the loops. I made the exit strokes in the forward italic R and Y more substantial, and I made the S and the C more related. So at this point, I was starting to edit my drawings while seeing what it looks like rotated 45 degrees for reasons I will get into later. And I found an extension for glyphs that shows me the rotated version of the glyph I'm editing, which was super helpful. So here is what it was looking at before the critique and after. I added some more extravaganza to the Q because I thought it could take it. It's a funky letter. And here's the M before the critique and after. And this is the full set of the capitals as they are today. And this is how they're looking rotated 45 degrees. I finally returned to the regular heading style, so I decided to sketch out the rest of the lowercase, including a very unconventional Y and Z. So I digitized it. I changed the Z right away because it was too unconventional, but the Y was on thin ice and did eventually get cut as well. These are the first capitals that I drew for the heading style. So I got partway through the alphabet, but I took a step back and realized that they just weren't really working. I decided to change them because the original construction was just too detailed for this level of hierarchy. And the angle of the slant was a lot less steep. It was a lot slower, so it feels less fast and spontaneous. And I think it calls for a more constructed and conventional design. So I did keep a vestigial loop, but the upstroke is gone. And I also designed a more conventional H, since it makes more sense for this style. So here are the sketches for the capitals with the new construction and some refined sketches and the digitized caps and lowercase with the refinements. I also drew the figures. Here's my process from sketches to digital. I initially drew the lining figures, but I think the style of the typeface really calls for old style figures, but I did digitize both. Now this is interesting. So the typeface is nice for setting in circular patterns, but there's some issues that come up, like these letters are clashing. So I made some alternates specifically for circular typesetting. The ampersands, of course, have to be crazy. So I did a lot of sketching, and you can see how some ideas were developed further and others went extinct. The three on the right are what I ended up going with. This is them in use. So I have one for caps as well as one for lowercase. And finally, I did end up coming back and drawing at least a full lowercase for the two bold display styles. So this is the family overview as of today. And at this time, I also chose the name of the typeface, Antiphony. You might be wondering, what does that mean? Antiphony means antiphonal singing, playing, or chanting. What does antiphonal mean, you might ask? Antiphonal is an adjective that means sung, recited, or played alternately by two groups, usually in church music. I think this suits my typeface quite well, since I have these opposing styles kind of singing the same tune. And my typeface also has some vaguely religious undertones with the historical blackletter influences. Moving on to use cases, I really envision the typeface being used in lockups like this. It's at its most legible when it's rotated 45 degrees in either direction, so it's suitable for these niche scenarios. And it's nice for creating the levels of hierarchy. And you can make these sorts of things, create shapes in dimensionality with poetry or lyrics. It can also be used in a very simple and elegant way. It can look really nice just stacked in one style like this. Another lockup, I think there's some nice dimensionality, that can be created with the styles. And because you have these complementary styles that are so opposite and different, it opens up opportunities to do some really interesting things. It can look really nice set in circles as well, which is why I did all of those alternates before. And it also looks really nice in motion. Yes, that is all for me. Thank you, everybody. Stay in touch, reach out, say hi. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you.
I did not.
Hang on.
We have a break here.
Betsy, thank you for all this fantastic work.
Thanks.
Coming up is Nina Fhub.
I'm here.
You're here?
What?
Okay.
Well, that should be it, right?
There you go. Nina.
Cool. So hello from me, Nina Fhub, and from The Hague. There's actually sun shining. Wow, that's a good sign. In this presentation, I will just quickly show you a bit of the process of my final project, Drape. I want to quickly introduce myself. I'm a 30-year-old type and graphic designer and also wood sculptor from Germany. And having a background in design and sculpture and also general interest in crafts definitely influenced my final project approach. So the final project being a very big thing, I had in the beginning quite some respect and also trouble starting. And to help me with that, I defined some general goals. I wanted, for example, to step out of my comfort zone, which is the text typefaces, and also challenge myself by starting with a display. And important thing too was to also produce actual objects and not just files. After having many ideas, I realized that there were some keywords that played a role in many of them, like, for example, materiality, dimensionality, mass, haptics, and movement. So I developed a concept around those that was focusing on fabrics and textiles and the differences that could be found in their characteristics, like, for example, light versus heavy, stiff versus fluid or flowy, and rough versus slick. I started with some quicker sketches focusing on the previously defined keywords, and I realized that I wanted to build the shapes more influenced by the materials themselves, instead of writing with specific tools and the conventions that come with that. From the quick sketches, I picked one italic that I liked, and I started refining. I wanted to show a fluid, flowy texture with a contrast between wavy and smooth, and also clear breaks in the shapes. Based on that italic, I wanted to design an upright companion. Showing the same approach here was much more difficult since the upright construction is way less dynamic and fluid from the start. I tried different ideas and decided to go with a serif version for a nice contrast. At the same time, I also sketched an idea that was more focused on the differences in mass and volume. And although I liked the texture of these sketches, I discarded them at this point, but I kept the approach of dealing with increasing weight in the back of my head. Going from sketch to digital, I started with italic again. And in the beginning, I tried to stay very close to the sketch and do just a few adjustments to see in different letter combinations if this idea had the potential to become a font. And although I liked the interesting texture, it was way too much going on at the same time. And for example, like the essenders going in different directions, that had to be adjusted. The Roman version was quite difficult to figure out. I decided I could have a different texture from the italic and be a bit more stiff and stable, but I still wanted to incorporate many of the features from the italic, which resulted in quite an unharmonious first draft with many different design directions in one, and it also looked rather like a text typeface than a display. It needed more structure and contrast for more sharpness. I also took the feature of the distinct counter shapes more serious here. With changing the Roman, the italic also needed way more contrast and precision. I liked the overall dynamic appearance, but there were many things that were still disturbing and jarring. I had, for example, many problems finding logical solutions for shapes because I had to invent the logic first. Letters that should be easy to figure out, like lowercase l or I, were creating many problems in my case. In the Roman, it was hard to figure out how to balance the complexity of the shapes and placing the contrast with having the very distinct counter shapes. I was stuck and I needed to define some clear directions to continue. I set, for example, a preferred size starting from 48 points for use, so it would make things easier to decide. I also allowed the two styles to be more different from each other while still speaking the same design language. The upright got quite a different appearance in the following month. I tried to harmonize all the different features while still having a lot of character in the shapes. I paid attention to the special counters since that was a feature that both the Roman and italic shared. All in all, the design got better, more precise, and it gave me a direction that would be a good base for developing my project further. The italic got a makeover too. The decision that changed the appearance the most here was, besides, of course, adjusting single shapes, that I moved the cuts in the stems from the middle to the outer parts, creating more of a feeling of an in and out stroke. Like this, the texture was way less jarring, and the rounds and other letters without cuts were fitting in nicer. Big task was also to design the caps for the italic. My first approach was based on the structure of the lowercase letters, but they seemed too loud and a bit weird. So after testing many ideas, I decided to go with a semi-flowy direction. I then tried to make the construction of the caps more rigid and adding dynamic through a tapering in the stems. That was already an improvement, but it also was a bit too different in dynamics compared to the lower cases. And as a result, I went from a straight baseline to an angled one that would fit better with the lower cases. Also, the one-sided serif was creating problems with the weights, for example, in letters like E or L, and also the diagonal, so I had to cheat a bit. Adding new characters, I also drew diacritics to test my fonts in different languages, and I tried to give them the same dynamics as the letters, which results sometimes in some rather expressive shapes, but I think for display that's okay. The italic got diacritics too, and also some fun ligatures to improve the text image. For the figures, I decided to go with lining because I thought they were the most versatile in display settings. And they follow the same approach as the letters, which gives them a nice and expressive appearance. And quite early, I had also thought about a possible design space for my project. I was interested in having variable axes since this was fitting my concept nicely. And here I remembered also the sketches from the beginning. I tested the width axis first because I found the image of unfolding and stretching quite fitting for my project. Although I liked these sketches, I decided to try out boulder weights instead. First, I went with a rather conventional approach of keeping the appearance of the shape and the contrast and just decreasing the weight. And I quickly reached the limits here because some shapes would get very strange and the text image was therefore too inconsistent. So one way to go was to just don't increase the weight too much, but I decided to go a different and more extreme direction and close the shapes more. The result, this resulted in adjusting the initial shapes quite a lot to have a consistent appearance of the counters and the space between letters. The masters are variable, and I like the change in texture. It goes from very flexible, flowy to more smooth and strong. I have 3 intermediate weights, and they are adding more possibilities for the use, since the regular weights are quite light and the black ones are not really meant for text setting. For the Roman, I followed the same logic, and having a harmonious appearance in the counters and spaces between letters was here more difficult because there's a lot more of variety in the shapes in the upright construction already. This also has a range of from regular to medium bold, extra bold to black. This is how the variable font behaves. I think it's quite a nice animation that adds to the concept. I stuck to the concept of starting with a display and moving from there to text. And for the text version, I went for less contrast and calmer shapes, more unified proportions, wider characters with bigger counters, and an overall softer appearance. With having those stronger serifs, I wanted to adjust the length of the descenders and ascenders a bit, so yeah, give it more space. I made some attempts for italic text version. Here the changes of course needed to be more drastic because in text the 2 styles really need to work together and they had to become more companions and less counterparts. The text version is a nice addition to the display styles and it works best for running text from 8 point onwards. So this is how my final design space looks like. I did not realize the extended version in the end, but I still think it could be worth developing it in the future. After bumpy start, Drape is now a versatile family with a strong character and interesting details that especially works well in display settings. And since the structure of the Roman and italic is quite different, but the overall energy matches, it creates quite a distinct appearance in use. The quite extreme black weights give a nice contrast to the regular, and they add also another direction in the design space. Yeah, in the end, I managed to fulfill my goals from the start with this project. To produce some actual objects, that was also one of my goals that would match the concept I wanted to apply my typeface to fabrics. I was curious how the design would appear and change in different techniques. And here I used the embroidery technique, for example. It required quite a lot of testing and a lot of time also. But in the end, I was very happy with the result and also the haptic experience that it was adding. The use of color in that medium was also a nice change from designing black and white vectors all the time. I tried silkscreen too, and the analog feel it adds to the design was a nice plus here. Overall, these experiences gave me new ideas for my digital design, actually. And I also find it important to make my design into something tangible. So the project feels less theoretical and a bit more real. Yeah, and that was it from my side. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Nina.
Yeah, Ceci's not here yet. There she is.
Here she is.
Hello.
Cecilia,
Yes.
we see you and we're looking for your presentation.
Perfect. 1 second. Okay, can you see my screen and everything?
Looks good. Go ahead.
Great. Hi, my name is Cilia del Castillo. I'm very happy to be here with you. Also a bit stressed, of course, but mainly happy to share with you the process of my final project at TypeMedia. This picture is from my board in the studio, and these are my amazing classmates. This picture is from few months ago. Somehow it feels like it was 30 years ago, but it's from a few months ago. So to understand better my project, I think it would be good that you know a bit about my background. I come from Mexico City, but I've been living in Barcelona for the past few years, where I studied illustration, type design, and I was also trained as a calligrapher. So my approach to letters is deeply connected to my roots and my passion to calligraphy, for calligraphy. I find great interest in the eclectic blend that defines Mexican culture, where the richness and contradictions emerge from the merging of various cultures at the same time. So in the last years, I've been trying to focus my work on exploring these intersections between cultural heritage, craftsmanship, calligraphy, and type design. So the foundation of my project was about finding a meeting point between ancestry, crafts, and type design. And also, I wanted to bring to the table the new learnings that I got at TypeMedia, especially everything related to my Fleshman Revival project, which I will talk more deeply later. But actually, how to relate such broad concepts as heritage, ancestry, crafts with Fleshman typefaces. All of them are so complex topics that it seemed somehow impossible. So at the beginning, I was a little bit lost. Actually, I was super lost, doing many explorations where I tried to approach my drawings through my reference. At that point, everything's impossible, and it was very hard to focus on something. So these are some of the sketches that I worked on. I first tried to explore drawing letters related to patterns found on carvings. Then I also tried to draw letters through patterns found in crafts. Some pictures. I explored letter shapes through calligraphy. I also explored through illustration using the same brush that I normally use to practice calligraphy. And also through abstraction and the construction of the letters. And of course, with TPEX to explore weight and contrast in the TypeMedia style was also a thing during the process. So yeah, so this was my exploration until I understood that I was so lost in this huge forest of ideas. Honestly, I thought that through exploration, I would somehow get to this eureka moment or as some sort of revelation, but spoiler alert, it doesn't work that way. The only way to build connections until you reach something that starts to make sense is by actually doing something, making a first move. So it starts by doing one digitization and making decisions that lead you to the next step. So as one of my dear classmates would say, TypeMedia is about making decisions even though you know they are wrong at the beginning. So I did that. I stopped postponing digitization and I just went for it. I started drawing from this sketch, which was one of the simplest that I had. And what I did with this sketch, it started as an exploration of the proportions and ornamental features in Fleischmann optical sizes. So I kept the contrast that the brush gave me at the beginning. I synthesized the shapes and the serifs. I used Fleischmann proportions as a reference to redraw the letters. And at the end, I changed some of the terminals to bold terminals in order to introduce some of those features. The final outcome to digitize was this. And I chose this weight because my first intention was to start with a text typeface. So these were my first digitizations, not knowing actually where would it lead me. I had to go back and forth to my drawing to make sure that I was keeping the intention I had there. You know, somehow always the step from the sketch to digitization feels like entering to another dimension, and sometimes you end up with something completely different to the sketch. Sometimes that's a better thing, but sometimes it's even worse than the sketch. So it was hard, that part. I also drew a first attempt of an italic inspired by Fleischmann cuts. I kept refining my typeface. I add more weights, and I also tried more different types of contrast. And after many iterations, when I was already understanding better my design, I went back to see my good old friend Fleischmann to have a look to that Baroque style that captured so much my attention in the beginning. So the more I explored this, I could understood a little bit better the connection between these ornaments and crafts that I also found very appealing in Mexican craftsmanship. So I think it's this Baroque style that builds the bridge between them. Baroque in Mexico, a style from the 17th and 18th century, merges European elements with indigenous traditions, creating this unique version of Baroque that incorporates pre-Hispanic elements and local craftsmanship. And later in history, these pre-Hispanic elements were also introduced and mixed in other styles like Neoclassic and Art Deco. By the way, thank you very much to my friend Maiko, who is now in typographics, actually. He's present there, and he provided me with this picture from Manuel Centurion carving, the one in the right. So I was very lucky to discover all this when I did my revival project, to discover Baroque typefaces. This is not my final project. This is my revival project during the first semester. And I think aesthetically, it captured my attention because I felt somehow it was related to this Baroqueness that I find appealing. So while working on it, I learned that Baroque and transitional typefaces were the ones who bridged the gap between old style and modern type designs. I researched existing revivals, and I understood that this kind of unique and eclectic features can give a typeface kind of a distinctive and timeless aesthetic, and it can bring it to the present in a different way. So this was very, very interesting to me when I was doing this research. Here are some pictures of my revival. It has a text and a display typeface style. So I could see that all of this, I could start understanding that in my revival, but I think I understood that deeply working on my final project. So back to this, somehow, all this resonated with the eclecticism that I also find in Mexican culture. So I tried to introduce some of that ornamental features to my typeface. First, I did it in a very straightforward way, even taking inspiration of the fact that they were carved shapes. So I introduced some cuts like with a chisel. Then I worked on proportions. I tried to soften a little bit the shapes to bring back a bit of the Fleischmann's elegance. And the more lighter the typeface gets, it feels a little bit more soft. At this point, I felt more comfortable with my design. It felt more mine in a way, so I kept going. And the more I worked on these, I had to understand that all the features that I wanted to introduce would lead me to a display typeface. Later in the process, when I knew my design better, I did a text version. And by later, I mean 2 days ago, actually. Yeah, so here you can see the caps and the lowercase working together. I also worked, thanks to Alexandra feedback, in some nice diacritics that could fit the typeface. Also playing with the same idea of ornaments. Then I started working on the italics, which were a new whole adventure. I had to go from something very soft and fluid that I tried to in the beginning to something more stiff to match better the Roman. This was thanks to Paul Barnes' feedback, and it was very useful to actually understand how italic can relate to the Roman version. So I think now it's working much more better in that way. Yeah, and once we went all the way to the Baroque style, I embarked on the adventure of drawing an ornamental style. So these were some of my sketches. This was also like, it took me also a lot of time to understand what I wanted to do with this, because I knew that if I wanted to introduce these kind of things, one way would be to treat this as swashes, and just play around with this idea around the letter. But what I wanted is to have these swashes or these ornaments going inside the letter to create kind of a pattern in a way. So these are some of my tryouts. So after hours of feedback, millions of corrections, some tears, of course, a little bit of drama, I'm happy to present you Anima, a display and text typeface that explores a meeting point between artisanal idiosyncrasies of Mexican culture and historical conventions of Baroque typefaces. In Latin, anima means soul or spirit, and related to psychology, anima refers to the unconscious feminine aspect of a man. The anima represents the true inner self of an individual. And I really like this name because I think this typeface, it really wants to bring the essence of many things at the same time. So anima currently has a weight and a width axis in display sizes. At one point, I had a talk with my friend and type designer, Santiago Orozco, and he strongly recommended me to also play with condensed version and with a width axis. And I am very grateful about that, because I think this gave something else to the typeface in a way. I also have the text version just in regular right now. So I will show the typeface in few slides. Here you can see some of the styles and also the condensed version. Here you can see how it works in text in different styles and also the italic. The condensed version, which I think this new width, like it helps like to make everything a little bit more compact, and it brings like another flavor, which I really like. Some nice text in French, because not everything is Spanish. Yes, some other images where you can see. This was the first iteration of the italic. Italic working with Roman. And the ornamental, which right now it's mainly actually ornamental. Like it works just for layouts and for playing around, and just to bring like a bigger statement about this Baroqueness. So now that I see back all the process, and thanks to the feedback I received, I now understand that the strength of this typeface lies a bit in the interplay between tension and softness. And I think this balance, in a way, gives a little bit of expression and personality while trying to maintain some sort of stability. So I think it's a good mix between both. Finally, I show you just 2 more layouts, and here relating to my main referent. Yeah, and this is my final project. It's been a whole journey, and just to finish, I'm still saving my tears for the final presentation, which is next week. But I just want to express how grateful it has been being part of TypeMedia this year. Like, it's been one of the greatest adventures of my life. So thank you very much to my teachers and friends. Thanks.
Cecilia, thank you. It was an amazing presentation.
Thank you. Ando.
We will continue. Looking at my list. Andofine. There you are.
Hello. Oops, that's the last slide. That's not good. Hello, everyone. Should I start?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Chantal, and we both welcome you to my presentation. I'm going to start by presenting myself. My name is Andofine, or Ando. I come from Paris. I am mostly known for doing display type, often extreme and stuff along the like. My favorite games are Cyberpunk 2077 and Baldur's Gate 3, and my favorite show is Arcane. I have a tattoo of Cilia from The Witcher. Also, I love dragons. I will start this presentation with my ideas for the kickoff. These were my intentions for the final project. At the same time, I did not want to just draw a perfect text typeface because it wouldn't feel truly like who I am. I promised myself to put all my expectations on the side. After listing my interest, I ended up with 5 ideas for the kickoff. I'm going to briefly go over what they were. By the kickoff, I was actually planning an interconnection of all my ideas. My first idea was the tool. I did a lot of hands-on experimentation. My main idea was how can exploring the edge of illegibility make us understand legibility better? And also, can anything be a tool for type? My second idea was the skeleton. For this, I thought, how can we explore different constructions in order to determine what is most legible? And also, what is the essence of a ledger? So I drew a lot of modules on paper. My third idea was the module. Speaking about it, I thought, can the use of modules expand the definition of type, especially in terms of legibility? And also, is there even a true definition of type, or is that moldable? How can it be reduced to its essence? My fourth idea was the world or world building. I thought, what role could chains play in terms of type design? And also, how can characterization and gamification help us think of design spaces? And my last idea was the parasite. I thought, how can the concept of foreign bodies be translated into type? And also, how can concepts of viability and legibility play roles in that approach? I was thinking of foreign bodies, fungus, webs, and networks. I have incredibly kind and visionary classmates, and the discussions we had post-kickoff were super important for me to realize that the most unexpected and surprising thing to do in my particular case would be to do a text font. Once I took the decision to let go of my fears of text, my first step was to take the last state of my contrast research project from the previous semester. I adapted to it the ascenders and descenders proportions of a typeface I think works really well for text. After some sketching, this is a state I was starting to get to. I made a lot of iteration of each glyphs, really a lot. And in order to challenge my preconstructed beliefs about text, I started proofing extensively, which I had never properly done before TypeMedia, so I'm really grateful to have learned how to do that. I also started sketching a display that I did not end up using. I was thinking of naming each of my stars as Dungeons and Dragons classes. And one of the ideas I had for the kickoff that I have not talked about is the idea of stars and constellations. With the help of a script my classmate Felix wrote, I made some experiments with components randomization. I was also dabbling in variable color fonts at the time, but I left that aside for now, as this one glyph at the bottom took me 7 hours. I decided I wanted to dive a bit more into my paper getting modules idea that had started before the kickoff. I cut modules out of paper, arranged them in the shape of letters, roughly, and drew over them, then digitalized it roughly as well. I completely redid my digitalization in monoline so I could start exploring different ways quickly. And this is the design space I was working with at the end of the experiment. I left that aside. I was feeling lost with all my ideas, so I sat down, took a good look at my progress, and took a decision. And one of my teachers asked me, what is the scope of my project? And this is the answer. Fantasy. Everything around this genre. I love almost everything about it. I'm constantly half within a world where dragons rule the world. When I'm in a good mood, it's for the best, and when I'm in a bad mood, it's for the worst, but always dragons. The first context I dive a bit more into in order to determine my design space is collectible playing cards, in particular Magic the Gathering that I have loved the aesthetics of for a long time. I look for the styles used, for the weights used, and use my findings as a basis for my design space. I knew I wanted text regular, text bold, text italic, and text bold italic, and maybe a display and a display italic. In order to have a feel for the display, I started researching posters and book covers related to fantasy, which helped me determine I actually wanted to try a display that would be more flavorful than what I had before. I was also starting to get curious about having an ornament style, and it was inspired by 80s 1-bit pixel sprites from video games, which I always liked the aesthetic of. I started making manicures, as optical sizes is something I have never worked with in terms of pixels before. I left that aside. This was the latest version of my typeface around March for an intended size of 12 points. And this was an overview of my potential design space. So to recapitulate, I was doing a family based around the concept of fantasy, with at its core a regular text weight. I was really happy with the direction I was going in, having a lot of fun and doing the unexpected. Once I determined I wanted to do fantasy, everything became smoother. I made a lot of back and forth mentally to try to figure out the boundaries of my project because it's hugely important for me to determine my design space, as the concept has a capital influence on it. What I honestly like the most in fantasy is stories of, you guessed it, dragons, so I was wondering if I wouldn't base my design space on it. More on that later. I looked at a lot of board, card, fantasy games in general to find a specific usage, as I wanted a board game as my application. I went to the board game cafe next to my place and looked at fantasy games to see which typefaces were used in the manuals and on the packagings. I wanted to see which styles and which weights had which usages. By April, I was thinking that my typeface could be used in a variety of applications, such as, for instance, a remake of Dragon magazine, layouts, a website header, and book covers in its display style, and yes, also board games and card games, maybe books. I kept thinking back of the cards. I took the plunge and chose it as my main application. Once I had my application, I went through many iterations of my design space, or dagger space, or dragon space, or dice space. I had discussion with my classmates that were really helpful determining what I wanted, but it remained a question mark for a long period. Based on my analysis of the anatomy of a playing card that I had been looking at, I started sketching a potential more accurate design space. The idea would be to have in place of a picture an illustration of something else in a setting. So for example, a specimen could be a deck of 26 cards for each uppercase on my display. Let's time travel a bit. Immediately after the second presentation, everyone told me that I should try to make a text style out of my display typeface I used for the titles, which is called Sichem and was very reminiscent of fantasy even for me. Sichem is already released in its display style, so I left that aside, but it was still really nice to have the opportunity to start a text version of it, as I want to do it in the future. And the meat and potatoes of my project was still very much the Roman regular text style, my biggest learning experience at TypeMedia. I continued the improvements all throughout the final project. I improved this style extensively. I went back to more classical models with the parallel pen to have a better feel for the italic construction. And this was the latest version of my italics that I had a lot of fun working on. I also started a bold that I continued further later on. I started a bold italic that I left aside for the final handing. I thought it would be really nice to have a song to represent something a bit more set in tangible reality, at least in my mind, than the fantasy feeling of my text font, so I started one. I also left that aside. I also really wanted to try out either ornaments or dingbats, which was a lot of fun, but you guessed it, I left that aside. Thinking about it, I actually did not want a more flavorful display. I was having too much fun learning how to do text, and I am glad my teachers encouraged me to try a display style. I first researched generic fantasy display and dragon typefaces. I also found some video games cover from the 80s that I absolutely loved and who had an initial feel. After a rough start, I pushed through and I managed to finally go to a direction I liked. I wrote down the instructions to reiterate the 28 process steps I took to experiment. The step I chose is the most right one on the second line. The display that resulted is my interpretation of something draconic in type, such as fangs, wings, or scales. It could also be reminiscent of obsidian stone, stalactites, and stalagmites. It's open to interpretation. It was difficult to work with. I decided to go back to the drawing board in terms of display. I also proofed this display to find the intended size, which is about 60 points if I put it in a layout. I started a color font with the intent of creating something reminiscent of magic and also golden engravings, aging type on all book covers. I learned a lot during this. I put that aside. In practice, by April, a family overview could look something like this. I was confident with my text from Unregular, but I still had questions about the design space, though I had found my playing cards application. I finally settled on a name for my family, which to the surprise of absolutely no one is Dagon. Not dragon, Dagon. The main brick was pivotal for me, in particular in changing the display to an Ensure style. I produced a lot. This is an updated overview of my design space post-Maybreak. I am grateful for one of my teacher's suggestion of removing the bold italic and the caption that replaced the song, as I needed to simplify everything. I dedicated some time to overhauling the italic. At the top, it was when I first completed the glyph set, and at the bottom, it's the updated version. I also extensively improved the italic with the help of my classmates. I kept looking back at these pictures. Unsures are my favorites, and it makes sense to test them out with my project. I am obsessed with the Baldur's Gate 3 video game at the moment, and it features an Unsure as its logo, so it was just a natural next step for me. I first took a solid look at my previous display. I had a conversation with my classmate Ceci. I was mentioning to her that what I liked about my display were the thick serifs and pointy bits, and Ceci helped me figure out that if I looked at my display in an abstract way, I could just focus on these elements, and cycled as Ceci's drawings. I interpreted from memory what I understood Ceci meant. The first step was to take my bold and draw a version with thick serifs and pointy ends mixed, just a few letters to start with. From the mixed version, I separated it into pointy and squarish versions. I interpolated a few letters to have a feel for it, but I felt like keeping it compatible was unnecessary at this point, so I put that aside. This is what I ended up with, two styles, one that is more like a pointy flare bold and one that is looking more like an unshawl. I decided to keep both and to put the unshawl as alternates to this stage. On parallel of working on the unshawl, I made some sketches and mockups from my process book. I also made some tests with 3D printing a big card for my process book cover. I went to the letterpress workshop to attempt to emboss it. It took my mind off a bit of the type, and it was very, very fun. I really wanted to start using my typeface in context, so as part of my specimen, I started remaking Baldur's Gate 3 character sheets. I discussed with my teacher Céline the possibility of creating an installation based on the cards I was planning for the specimen. I started building it extensively, and it will be ready for graduation. This is the final design of the cards that will make up the installation and who are my main application. I am using all my intended styles. This is an overview of my 26 cards in total and the patterns made from the letters on the back as of now. There is one for each letter of the alphabet. The idea behind the patterns is that they come straight from the letters and use the same process each time. I mirror the letters and use the Pathfinder on Illustrator and then place it. Lastly, here is an overview of Dagon as of now. This is my current book style state, my most complete style. I currently have 360 glyphs for that style, and I learned so much doing it. This is my latest base Latin italic version. This is my current state of the base Latin bold. This is the uncial no at its latest stage. The lowercase no serves as alternates for some uppercase letters, but not all letters have alternates. And to wrap up this presentation, Dagon will be a lifelong labor of love, and I am so ready for it. And just to go back to the beginning, at its core, this is what I wanted to do, and it is exactly what I ended up doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ando.
Thank you very much. I will now give the place to Jena.
Awesome.
Max. Can I start? Can I start already? Can you see me?
We can see you and we can hear you. Is your presentation on?
Yep.
You can see it yet?
Yeah, I forgot about this. Yeah. Can I start, right?
You can start.
Okay, I will start from the start. Hello, my name is Jena. I'm from Ukraine. And yeah, last 2 years when war started in Ukraine.
Just a second. Sorry,
Yep.
just a second. You're not showing a slide yet.
Okay.
Fabio is coming to help.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Now, okay. Yep. Well, hello again. My name is Jena. I'm an international student from Ukraine, and 2 years ago I ended up in Berlin and decided to enter to TypeMedia, and I did it successfully, as you can understand. And here is my presentation about my general experience in TypeMedia and about my final project and a bit about first semester. So my background is more about calligraphy and lettering rather than type design. So I was super excited to be here and learn like a lot of everything about type design, and I'm gonna share with you some of lessons I learned. Let's start. Speech is my nickname. You can find me on Instagram. And yeah, about TypeMedia. First, I want to say that TypeMedia, it's empirical. Sorry, it's empirical experience. It means that it's based on your own experience, and all lessons, most of lessons I learned here are very simple. But if you understand these things, these lessons on your own experience, you understand it very deeply. You will see what I mean. First semester. First semester started from sketching, and this is my first sketch. You can see how bad it was, but also it was fun. We did a lot of type cooker, and we just played with letters and pencils. Some of sketches became real physical objects, and I really obsessed to turn typography in something physical. You will see it also in my final project. Yeah, more lettering from first semester. Also, we had 2 projects. One of them was a contrast project. We made our type design in 3 styles, like regular contrast, high contrast, and low contrast, based on our calligraphy sketches. And it was very interesting for me because, as I said, I came from more calligraphic world, calligraphic field, but see calligraphy from type design perspective was really excited for me. I learned a lot from that. And yeah, this is second project, which was actually a revival project, and we explored. We did investigation about type we found in random book, and yeah, this is part of my research, and that was my first lesson, that exploration is the best inspiration. It means that the most thing that can inspire you, that can be as inspiration for you, it's doing something your own way and then explore this. Now my final project. My presentation set it up in my type design already, so you can see the shapes and the design during the whole presentation. And the most important discovery for me, you can see it's very simple. Do something instead of doing nothing. And this is what I mean about empirical experience, because it sounds very, very simple, but when you understand it, doing this big project, you understand it very deeply and you feel it on your skin, in your body. I started with, as everybody, I started with sketches, and there was a lot of different type of sketches, and my approach was doing something instead of doing nothing. So I knew that my idea will be related to my idea of final project will be related to something childish, something cute, something for children, but I didn't know for sure what it should be. So I start sketches. I start sketching, and I start do some experiments with material, also with lino cutting, and because I like crafts. And actually, this didn't lead me anywhere, but I enjoyed process very well. Also, as a I used to write calligraphy, and big piece of my sketches was in calligraphy, and I tried to one more of my ideas was to combine like soft shapes and sharp shapes, and you already can see it in my calligraphy research. Yeah, more calligraphy. I tried different ways, but at the end of the day, my project will not based on calligraphy, and starting from calligraphy, I put a lot of effort to avoid the calligraphic impact of my project. Well, but at that point, I was on calligraphy stage, and I invented my own way to write shapes. You can see it here, and here you can see duct. It's something in between calligraphy and lettering, and all main parts of letters written with one move. And then was first digitization. You can see calligraphy on the right and digitization on the left, vice versa, yeah. And I was not sure that I like it. Then I took another one snaky piece of my calligraphy and digitized it. And at this point, I learned two things. That this is okay, this is nice, I like it, it's nice kind of style of lettering, but I don't like way of cuteness, and also I don't it's hard to apply all your calligraphic ideas to type design, because it should work like one solid system, and for me it was hard and it didn't work. I start simplify, arrange things and organize them. And that was my first idea. I thought it's that simple. I will cut legs to all letters, and I thought it will work, but it was not. But the main direction was defined. I moved from the left on this side to the right. You can, on this metaphor, you can see, I hope, a main idea of direction I was moving to. Yeah, that was how I tried to harmonize my letters. I played with serifs, with cutting serifs, and I was trying to find right shapes to keep the idea I had in my mind. And everything was okay, but the problem was that my design was almost exactly like Cooper Black, but not that solid. On the top you can see my design and Cooper Black on the bottom, and it became a big problem for me for a long time. And text also didn't work for me. Now I understand that I could handle this design and make it work for text, but at that point it didn't appeal to me. So that's why I wanted to add new dimensions to my design, and first try to add one extra dimension was make a script. Yeah, I come back to calligraphy again. I did sketches and I did things like this, and then I try to, like, script could be very difficult system, and I try to simplify it. And I wanted to understand if I can manage such system with connects as a font. And I realized that it's doable, but then I just kicked this idea because I realized that there is no connect with my initial idea and script. But now, looking back, you can see that my final design on the top and script I was thinking about at the beginning, there is some links between them. Another new dimension was interpolation between sharp. So I had fluffy bold style on the right, and I did one more light and sharp style, and then I interpolated between them and tried to find something in the middle for text style. But then I also kicked off this idea because I couldn't find the match between these two styles. Here you can see the text I had in between in my interpolation. And then creases become, I moved pixels, I moved shapes, but I couldn't avoid the flavor of Cooper Black. And here you can see some of my variations of design I did. But then why I like crisis is because after them there is breaking through, and I found the idea. So that was my design after spring break, and I realized that there is two different ideas in my design, and that was the problem. On the top, you can see that something interesting happened in these letters in relationship between shapes and contours, and on the bottom is just something closer to Cooper Black, something more regular, I would say. So then I understood that I have to make a decision which direction I want to go, something more traditional or something that is more interesting for myself. Lesson 3. Lesson 3 is all about decision making. So it sounds simple, but it's very important, and it's very, I mean, deep idea when you work on type design projects. So once I understand this, I start to looking to new shapes and start simplify them, the shapes I had already on new level. And I thought about toys, about something for children, an application, and I thought about the cubes from wood, and I realized that letters on cubes are capital, and I start to work with capitals and simplify my capital letters, and that's what I had. Then I did the same. At this point I understood that it's turning out to something I like already, and I did the same to lowercase, and tada! At this point I understood, I saw already that I'm moving somewhere in some direction I really like, and yeah, this is metaphors for my design. I have currently I have 3 styles, also regular. Once I understand which design should be for my main style, which is bold, the regular went smoothly, and then I extrapolated with between them and did black style. So here you can see text and bold, my 2 main styles. More characters. Then I asked my friends to understand my own idea more. I asked my friends, colleagues, and designers to create to play with my font, and I wanted to explore how they see the idea, what I had as a result. And that was nice, because some of posters and designs was childish and cute, and some of them was not like only childish. There was this new dimension I was looking for. More use cases. Yep. Yeah, somebody made something just cute. And last thing about my project, it's fun. And I thought about, I still keep in mind the cube with letters, and I thought about something in material, something like where I can apply my typography except the editorial or, I don't know, printed design. And I thought about constructor. I spent some time to understand how I can even more simplify my letters and do like real constructor from this, how many things, details I need to have. And actually, I did it. It was challenging a bit to find all this connection and all these holes, how to make it work together as letters. And then I finally did it. And it was big fun for me. And it's this extra dimension I was looking for in my project. And then once you have this constructor, you can do really funny stuff with this. You can play, you can explore your typography. And of course, it's gonna be colorful. I painted it, and yeah, that was one more of my lessons I learned, that it's very important to be in present, but not in the prison of your mind, right? Because it doesn't matter how difficult, how challenging is the project, it's still always there is some room to find something playful, something joyful there, and it's very important to have this part to finish the project. And that's all that I have, and this is my constructor, and you will be able to play with it on graduation exhibition. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you for attention. Max is next.
Jena, thank you.
Thank you.
We will now continue with the presentation of Max Hall. Welcome, Max.
Hello.
Yeah. Okay. Is it ready, Eric? Eric?
Max, can we hear you?
Yeah, I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. You want to start?
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, yeah. Hi there. I'm Max. I'm an independent designer from Germany. And yeah, before TypeMedia, I operated in Saarbrücken, where I studied graphic design with the focus on yeah, typography. And yeah, I applied for TypeMedia to dive into the journey of type design. And yeah, my first semester started with full of discoveries in making a type family in the contrast project, as well as stone carving and a first yeah, the revival project was more about finding optical size experiments and all this little yeah different point sizes and yeah. So after the after the first semester, I started to think about the final project more from the perspective of the application. As a designer, I learned to choose typefaces for applications, and therefore I wanted to start from application first for the final project. So Maxine is the typeface I designed for my final project, and it's a typeface for various media, such as print and web. And it was also an adventure in optical scale and screen. So when I thought about print and web, this covered already every use case I could imagine. And thus I delved deeper into the topic. From the broad range of editorial, I focused on magazines and newspapers. There's no absolute distinguish between them. So yeah, they share many characteristics, but while newspapers convey information or news effectively as possible, a magazine wants to enlighten and entertain. Maxine is a newspaper typeface that is less dry and more fun to read, with a playful approach to tell topics that you might find in your weekend newspaper or the magazine that comes with it. So I started sketching out ideas and researched meanwhile also in more the newspapers and magazines that were inspiring for me. The first sketches I made were based on the contrast. Here it's more broad nib based contrast, and then I found more the expansion contrast models, which then turned into more narrow shapes. Inspired by 19th century newspaper headers as well as wood type, I delved deeper into the narrow styles I had in mind for the display. The translation, when it went narrower, turned more into translation, as vertical stress emphasized more the horizontals, especially in display.
I got quite hooked here in this sketch by the triangular shapes. And I continued to explore those shapes that were inspired by brush. Here I focused then on the textiles. Therefore I focused, on the textiles, because also if you design a newspaper or any editorial, it's more about the long reading text than the display. So on the top, the terminals were more squarish, and on the bottom, I had again those hooks. So I refined it to put a little bit more of the sketch into my digital. And when I refined it, I also refined it in the digital version with all the little details in the serifs. And so, yeah. When I then set text in it, I observed that there were a lot of huge white space in between the words that I had fixed afterwards. And they were also quite distracting, especially also the hooks and the italic construction of diagonal letters. So yeah, I had in mind, and this was quite a rabbit hole I fell in, to fix my proportion problem with a rather complex design space. It was like a sledgehammer to crack a nut. But I learned from it that I have to make steps visible, but still keep it simple and controllable. Especially with the design space and interpolation, there's the sweet spot to, that I still can control the output. So next, from the calligraphic approach I had in the beginning, I made a simplified version to deal with less complex point structure. And then I made several iterations to refine the proportions step by step by making wider proportions and to react on my proofs. What helped me was to set up a digital web proof environment. So I designed for screen, and I learned that it's also gonna be all right for print because I'm working on the proportions. So how did I do it? I set up a small web environment, a 3-column responsive website that floats down to 1 column on the web. And I had a mobile first approach. So I compared my target size of 15 pixels on the smartphone and compared it in different devices on my tablet and also on desktop. I viewed this on a distance first and at the same distance. And then as we hold our smartphones in a 30 centimeter distance, or tablets a little bit further away and the desktops even more further away. So the actual type size should also change. Here a little graphic to make it a little bit more clearly what I was aiming for. If you have different distances, the type size also grows and then it is visually the same. So after I was more and more convinced about my proportions, it was time to make it a little bit more the identity I want the newspaper to be. And then, it's more about the question of about a brand of a newspaper. And I sketched out while I was also designing and improving my typeface already, what could it else be? So I made here a slab serif approach with chopped off sans serif options, italics, drop terminals, a figure, yeah, and also some more expressive styles that could rather be in a Dracula film than in a newspaper. But it was fine, and I learned a lot about that. And then I also researched more about how typefaces were used and looked in the 19th century, or I had also a look at the legibility group, which some typefaces that inspired me were Ionic and the Scotch Romans that were cut by Richard Austin. So I made a new prototype and compared it to my previous approach. The one more sharp and dynamic, the other one more calm, friendly. And I was more convinced about that, but I checked it also on the website. And it was more obvious for me that this vertical stress works much better, which made sense for me because also the pixel grid on a screen emphasize a little bit more, it makes it a little bit more crisp, the static expansion based one compared to the translation one. So I decided in favor for the new approach and expanded the character set and continue to design more styles. The italic was quite a journey. First, it began as an informal companion to the Roman to have something more expressive. And then step by step, I tamed it down, the swashy features, cut off entry and exit strokes, and changed letter construction. Final change that helped me to find the direction, to match it more to the Roman, was to sketch over my previous stage and then made the counters more open and simplifying the upstrokes to upstroke construction and making the italic more dry. So the journey in changing the construction was also a process in making the proportions controllable and rigid. And finally, to match it to the Roman to have a good reading experience. One thing I've learned to test different width of italic to match it to the Roman, the narrower it was, the smaller the optical scale was. So later I discovered this again in the display styles. I made the two styles match together by also dealing with the terminal construction to make it a little bit more contemporary and sharp. Especially the inconsistencies in the figures helped me to develop that. I had a bunch of terminals to choose from. And also in the bold style that developed with the regular and italic. Here I explored how bold I could be. And again, in the digital, I made it more matching the Roman and figured out proportions. And what also helped me to find some intermediate steps and another bold were Lucas de Groot's interpolation theory. So for the optical sizes, for the micro I had in mind for setting small captions, I learned that it is good to make it chunky and some things more exaggerated in small size, but less detailed. And basically, the optical sizes are what was cut separately back in the days of metal type. It's the physical size of the typeface. And nowadays we can scale the digital typeface. So I wanted to design the optical size. I explored what happens in the smaller sizes. And if you compare now the regular and the micro, they are quite different, also in weight. You can do quite a lot, but what helped me was always to compare it and prove it. And yeah, so first approach was to make a taller X height, wider proportions, lower contrast, heavier weight. So I start and tried to keep things simple and scaled first the letter N by 104%, which deals with everything. But actually what happened was I compared the regular in 10 point with and the with different sizes, and then it appeared that in 9 point it looks good compared to 10 point, which was only 1 point size. And then I turned it more down and make it a little bit more chunky and more heavier to go in the comparison lower to smaller point sizes like 7 point. So what I learned then was the design of the display was also an exploration in weight, contrast, and width. And that width affects also the optical scale. I started with a high contrast approach and keeping the design interpolatable and cohesive. The more I delve deeper into the exploration of the letter construction, I wanted to have it a little bit consistent in interpolation. And then I explored further. And from regular, I came to bold, and from bold, I came to bold narrow. And suddenly I had a huge system of display styles, and setting it in a small scale smartphone size, I observed that setting text in different width, the narrow ones looks quite small compared. So what I could do was then to change the size and make it actually also an optical size. But this is also fine because I also wanted to have magazine use case. And not only for smartphone size, but also in print. This looks really good. So the family grew, and what the design space was growing to was actually this, that I had a reading edge micro size, a regular and an italic, and a bold, and 3 display sizes that could actually be also the narrow in the scale of the optical size. Here you can see a little bit of what the final stage looks like. The 3 display styles, the different italic, text, Roman, and bold, as well as some captions for the micro. So to sum it up, the 3 learnings I had in TypeMedia: make things visible, keep it accessible, the width affects the optical scale, and trust your eyes and react on your proofs, no matter if it's for print or for screen. So yeah, I will continue to my journey in optical scale, optical size, and optical illusions, and ready for the next type design challenge. So thank you very much. And yeah.
Thank you, Max.
Oh, he's muted. What's happening? He's still talking. Oh, but you.
We will continue with Fabio Pop.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I am here as well. Let me get the presentation. Yes, so I think you can also see my presentation, right? Eric? Am I good to continue? Houston, Houston.
I can hear you.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, really? And a connection, you know.
All right. So if I'm good to go, then I'll start. Just waiting the okay.
Yep. Just a moment, there's somebody else talking.
Okay. Let me know.
I'm gonna mute Peter if I can. There you go. No, wait, that's the wrong one. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so finally, the face matches the name in the corner. I think it's somewhere here. I'm Fabio Pop. Welcome to my presentation here. I'm going to talk about my final project as well. I'm only going to focus on that, and I'm going to give just a brief overview of it. I'm trying not to go into too many details and kind of just give just a feel of how the whole thing went and is still going, because it has been the focus of this year for me so far, of course. But you have heard that from other people as well. But okay, so hi, my name is Fabio Pop. I'm a graphic and type designer. I'm based in The Hague. My name is Italian, but I am unfortunately not. That's very disappointing in some cases, but that's the deal. I do like type, I do like code, so it made sense to apply to TypeMedia, which I still think it was one of the best decisions in my life. And I have been having a lot of fun doing all of or both of those things interchangeably in the last year or so. But okay, so talking about the final project, it started with the pen, as a lot of things start with the pen here at TypeMedia. In my case, it started with Eric's class, which is Form Studies. I did a lot of exploration with the pointed nib pen, which Eric once described as kind of difficult to manage sometimes. But I tried to sort of really embrace that fact and just do my best to kind of get a feel of it and to see how far I can push it or what I can and cannot do with the tool itself. Now, as a result, one of my experimentations became this thing, which was trying to put regular and reverse contrast together, which basically means that you just write vertically and then you write rotated 90 degrees, which would result in this reverse contrast. And then you try to put them together to result in this shape that's kind of squarish, but it's still very much calligraphy related. Now, I am not a calligrapher, as you may see here, but I did explore this quite a bit and I had a lot of fun with it. And I think the shapes are very, very interesting and very cool in themselves. And I thought that that was something to base a final project on. So looking at my pen calligraphy and these writing examples that you can see on the screen, I then went into sketching mode and I tried to sort of capture that flavor that this gives out and be more intentional with it and try to see what I can do here and what I cannot do here and how I can make this work for myself, which has resulted in the final project that's called Norma Vaganza. That's the name of the project. Now, if you are confused by that, that's okay. But this is the end result that we came up with. So this is the final or the current version of the typeface. And I'm skipping ahead quite a bit here. I'm basically skipping the entire project at this point. But this is what I ended up with. So the interesting bit is what happened in between. Of course, that's the process. That's what we are focusing on here. But the journey has its roots all the way back to the first semester, because I was always drawn to these shapes that are, like I said, very squarish. They have these squarish counters that you can see in this version as well. But they sort of are not too mechanical, and they still have a springiness to them. Hopefully, coming from the calligraphy, and hopefully still apparent in the current version. Now, like I said, this can be traced all the way back to the first workshop that we did. Actually, this is a 3D printed letter P that we did for a booklet that I have somewhere, but to be honest, I don't really know where I put it, so I didn't scan it for this presentation. But there was this letter P that I designed a while ago, and we 3D printed it, and that was the shape that you can see on the right-hand side. That was the vector that it was based on. And now if I fast forward again to the current version of the project, I have a lightweight that's remarkably similar. It's survived relatively well. So a lot of things have changed in the project, but I would like to hope that the main essence of it and that flavor that I really like to talk about, I hope that remained, and it's still apparent in the final or current designs. I keep saying final, but nothing is final, so just ignore that. It's just the current version that we currently have and work with. Okay, but this was done for the letterpress workshop, like I said. But I also wanted to do some other experimentation with it, including this drawbot things that I just played around with. I was wondering how you could parameterize such a shape or such a letter O if you want to. It's not really an O, but it's basically the same as a letter O. You can see that there are numbers on the bottom. Those are the parameters that I kind of based this on. It's basically a ratio between the inner and the outer curve tension, something like that. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it was a lot of fun to play around with this. And you could see how those squarish counters are still there, but they're not overly mechanical. I was trying to avoid being too, I don't know, too mechanical about it. But it's a really nice area to be in and to play around in. And of course, you can make it move as well, because why not? Because it looks kind of cool when it folds in on itself and it results in these negative shapes, or these just overlapping shapes that kind of cancel each other out. And you can also, of course, come up with just random patterns with it, which is really nice, and all of it is cool. But what does that have to do with my project? Well, not too much, but it's sort of at the core of it, and that's kind of what I was trying to preserve all the way through. So following my sketching phase, I knew that I needed to land on something that I can work and start digitizing. So I kind of was intentionally already thinking about the name and wanting to preserve that, and I wanted to have something that already is a good starting point. So I landed on this pencil sketch that I finally digitized, and this was the first version, which was, I believe, from March 3rd or something like that, a couple of months ago. And this was the first version of the regular that's digitized. From the same drawing, I really like these loopy italic shapes. I think they have a very nice organic nature to them, and they kind of still keep the same idea of having the double contrast, if you will, that you can have with the pen. So it's vertical and horizontal stress at the same time. And I just really like these shapes, and I was wondering how I could make something that would fit the regular. So this was the first italic that was kind of making as a companion that I made as a companion to the regular. Now, if you put them together, they kind of feel sort of similar, but there are obviously a couple of things that would prove kind of problematic in the future. This was from March 5th, as you can see on the screen. And then if I fast forward again to the end of the project, well, I mean, that's a pretty big difference between the two of them. But, you know, the essence is hopefully still there, and that springiness and that organic nature of it is hopefully still there, and it's not too overly mechanical, even though it got a lot more squarish and quite a lot bolder, as we may see as well. So I've been skipping through the project quite a bit because I wanted to show the end result, sort of not to keep anyone hanging on this, and to kind of show where we are at the moment without just building up to it. But to keep myself sane and to help myself work on the book, I also generated a lot of versions that I could put into this helper. It's sort of a timeline. What you can see here is basically a calendar that has all of the months, and the different colors that you can see, those are all phases that are the separate parts where something important happened through the project. So it's not divided by month, it's mostly divided by phase. You can also see our second presentation, third, and the green light that are highlighted here. That were the most important milestones in the second semester at TypeMedia. I'm sure you've heard about those as well. Excuse me. Now, as you can see here, I kind of timestamped each day the current version of the font, so I could sort of trace it back what happened before and what went down in the previous days and weeks. So I could see what I was doing on every day, and that's very, very useful because sometimes I just didn't forget. Well, most of the times I didn't remember what I was doing in specific days. So this was kind of a really nice reminder and a very good guiding star that could help me put together the book and its contents. Now, the things that you can see here are the regular, the italic, the bold, and the bold italic. But I also have one extra weight, aptly named extra, because why not? That came out of sketching, because basically I felt that my regular weights and the core weights that I have are kind of good enough, and they are a good basis to base the project on. Of course, they can be expanded, and they can, I'm not saying that that they don't need any work, but I felt good about them enough so that I could feel that something else might be interesting to explore as well, which is how this extra came to be, which was sort of the slabbiest slab that I could draw. I was thinking about what's the most black, heaviest slabby slab that you can ever draw. And as it turns out, you can sort of only do that if you think about white space a lot more than black space. Who would have known? That's not that surprising, I think, but it was for me. So the first sketches came to be after playing around with the white in the letters, and you can see that this really dark nature of it and this heavy weight is coming from that. That was the first version. In the adjusted version, I kind of just opened the counters a little bit, but I was very shy with that. And then the current version is very similar to it. I didn't really change it that much. You can see that it's pretty much very close to what it was in the beginning as well, because I think I had a good idea of what this needed to be, and I didn't want to change it that much. Now, if you look at these shapes, then you might think what I was thinking as well, that of course they need to be 3D because they're just basically asking for it, which is exactly what I did. I 3D printed them in 3 colors. So we have black, white, and translucent. And if you're around in The Hague during the graduation show, you can come and pick them up if you are interested in that. But yeah, so that was a lot of fun to just play around with it and just to see how they would feel like in a small setting and just a tiny object as well, which was a lot of fun as well. Now, I've been talking a lot about the things that happened before, and I kind of skipped the part where I did the work, basically. So moving on to the nerd zone, we can kind of see how the project evolved throughout the presentations and the most important bits. And I'm going to walk you through it, but I don't really want to get into too much detail because, to be honest, yeah, it's really hard to pick one highlight or one important thing that we did, because all the work is a summary of all of the micro decisions that we need to do on a minute-to-minute basis, pretty much. But this is what I had in the second presentation. You can see that I had a very limited glyph set, of course. I didn't have any bold italics. That wasn't the goal at that stage. I just wanted to see what were the styles and how can I preserve the flavor again. There's that flavor. And how to make it work, of course. And then once the third presentation happened, you can see that I've had a much more clear idea of how the art direction should go. Now, from the third presentation onwards, to the green light and to the current version, there is not much that has changed in superficial terms. So you can see that these three, this one, and this one, are pretty much the same. But just to give an insight to what we are doing as type designers, I think it's nice to just highlight some of the things that have happened. So, for instance, in the very first version, I needed to simplify all of my shapes, right? So I needed to make everything shorter, and I needed to keep everything a little bit snappier, and I needed to just keep everything more consistent because the outlines were all over the place because I drew them as they were. The italic was similarly a very difficult thing to do because I really like these loops, but they're not doing anything in terms of legibility. Sadly, it's really difficult to reconcile them with the rest of the styles. So the first thing was that I needed to simplify them. So you can see how I was trying to get rid of the vertical stroke and keep some of the horizontality of it, but that would still need to work, of course, with the construction. So you need a lot of weight in there, and then the whole thing is just spiraling. And then there's the bold that was definitely not bold enough, and then so the regular was also lower, so the bold needed to be lower but also fatter, and then this whole thing happened with the G that you can see here. Then moving on with the updated italic, I saw that all of my angles were all over the place because then again, I just did them very quickly. So I just needed to make them more consistent, which is what was happening here. Also, the italic was way too light in comparison to the regular, which is a big deal. And so, you need to make it a little bit bolder. The bold also had no contrast whatsoever, so you needed to include some contrast after a while. And then since you changed everything else, you need to also update the bold italic once and then twice, and then go back to the bold because it was not bold enough. And then once you put that all together, you kind of have all of the milestones that you can see in a project. So this is kind of how it looks like in the end. Now, if you're also thinking about the other thing that I was thinking about, this can definitely turn into a very nice time lapse that you can see here. And in summary, that's basically how it's going and how it has been going before as well. And that's what was happening. I see Eric. Okay, he's going on. All right. So, that's how the whole project was going on as well. It's a summary of all of these micro decisions that may seem like a tiny change in locally, but then it has a huge effect on everything else that comes before it. And yeah, just everything is a result of that. So yeah, basically that's how the project is currently going. I can see it go into many other directions. You can expand this however you want to, but my plan was never to have a very full character set or a full range of weights and widths and the most variable font that you can imagine, but mostly to go into the thing that I'm showing you right now to learn the basics and to kind of see how to make these decisions. And I believe that's what I was doing. So it's been a very fun, almost a full year. And I'm looking forward to the rest of it and what comes after. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Fabio. Coming up, Pauline Forrest.
Hello, is it okay?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Very good. You want to start?
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Pauline. I'm from France. And before TypeMedia, I graduated from ESSEC Type in Amiens, where I did an internship at Production Type. And I also worked at Typo Fonderie, and I released a few typefaces on Future Fonts. And here is what I've been doing the past few months. I started with Peter Bilak's assignment, where we had to present our interests in typography. And from that moment, I knew that I wanted to work around signage. I found this book, Signs and Lettering in the Environment by Phil Baines and Catherine Dixon. And according to that book, there are two kinds of signs. There are signs that direct and instruct and inform and regulate. and signs that name and define spaces, identify an environment, and record its specificities. And I chose this second kind of signs. Not that I don't like traffic signs, but hiking kiosks and hiking signs just have longer paragraphs and use multiple styles. So yeah, I felt like it was maybe a better opportunity for me. With that in mind, I started to explore with different kind of tools. I had no clue at this point what I was searching for, but I knew that I wanted to design something expressive. And at some point, I became obsessed with those kind of shapes, with flared serifs, chunky proportions, and sharp, pointy, brushy terminals. I started to make a collection of signs based on what was happening in the TypeMedia studio, and signs about life advices from friends and family. And each time I would fill all the space of the sign, playing with contrast and proportions and weight. And that gave me a first hint on the kind of design space I would need eventually. I started to digitize it pretty quickly, but then even though I loved it very much, I needed to explore a bit more just to be sure this was the right direction. So I started to sketch negative stencils, positive stencils, and even though keeping the magic of those drawings in RoboFont was a really nice challenge, I chose not to work around this kind of style because I wanted this graduation project to be a bit less display and maybe a bit more neutral. I wanted to learn more about managing different masters and how to build a bigger type family. I did a very first design space and experiment with 3 different axes: contrast, weight, and width. And I decided to ditch all the styles that signage purpose don't need, which are lightweights and high contrast. So that left me with those 4 masters. And I remember that at this point, my concern was, how the hell am I going to match all the curves between all those very different styles? So the solution that I chose was to make everything squarish and think about that later. This is how the instances looked like. Everything was fine, but then we went to Berlin and we had a type crit. And this is the moment where I focused on how to design a typeface that match the whole atmosphere of walking and hiking in nature. I wanted to focus more of the reading atmosphere than the rest, and also how to make a typeface that has some personality, yes, but also that is highly legible. The advices that I got from the type crates were, yeah, you might design something charming, but don't make everything so rigid, please. And how can you relate it more to brush calligraphy? How can you make a more sassy, cheeky, sarcastic typeface too? So back to the nag, I decided to focus on the narrow regular style first and to set the design choices before moving to the other masters. About the regular, after drawing the caps, I started to draw the lowercases. I just copied and pasted parts of the caps, and for some reason you end with expansion contrast when you do that. Then I tried different joints, and I don't know why, but back then I thought, yeah, everything looks way too ancestral, and this is not the right thing to do. Big mistake, and I understood it lately, but yeah, that's how you learn. And I decided to take an in-between solution. I was drawing running connections with smooth counters inside, and then translation joints outside. Here you can see that the lowercases were way too wide and way too grotesque. I changed the construction to something more humanistic. And also I learned that when you design something for signage, people are going to watch it from quite some distance. So if you draw very thin terminals, it's going to disappear eventually. So you need to trim them. Then I moved to the extra bold, and I started with this recipe. I just took the points from the regular and then I moved it here and there. And hey, it looks like you stretch the letters, and I learned that later you need to compensate the contrast to even the color. I made everything interpolable also, and I really liked how the bold style looked, and it felt amazing. But then, hey, I learned a new problem, which is proportions issues. To fix that, I, thank God, changed the joints from this running construction to this kind of shapes. And I did exactly the same on the extra bold, and it's a great solution to improve the weight distribution. Moving on the italic, I just started to slam the Roman, and then I made it a bit more condensed, and I changed the A to a single story A, I changed the G to a single story G. And then, new problem, when you start to draw the italic, it's important that it matches the Roman in terms of tone. So in my applications, I'm going to use the Roman and the italic mostly for translation. So it's important that if the Roman feels very straight and formal, probably the italic should do the same. And here you can see that it's not the case. So I needed to make the italic a bit more geometric, a bit more condensed also. So I just tamed down the curves and I introduced segments in the start and ending strokes. I also drew some diacritics to be able to lay out signs in English, but also in other European languages. I started to play with those three styles that I had, the Roman, the italic, and the extra bold. And then I was looking more and more to hiking signs from different places. And I was surprised how those signs use quite an amount of text. And I wanted my typeface to be legible, but for that you need to proof it. And for that you need a minimum size. So what I did is to lay out many signs and to proof it and to print it and to see how it reacts. I did it on A3 and 4, portrait, landscape, and the final answer was this typeface is great for 24 points and beyond. Then we had the amazing visit of Paul Barnes, and he helped me a lot on how to improve the color of the typeface. And he told me, well, you have a problem with those kind of shapes, is that when you have flaring stems, it goes very dark in the lower part of the letters, so maybe it needs a bit more mass in the joints and in the shoulders. So yeah, I just needed to lower the joints and make everything a bit more balanced between top and bottom. And here are the very last improvements. I started to expand the character set, and I increased the extra bold X height of 30 points. So the capitals don't look shorter compared to the ascenders. And also I needed more room to refine the lower cases. The last master that I wanted to design was the extra bold italic. I just used the same recipe as the same recipe that I use for the extra bold Roman. And about the slant, optically, if I use 10 degrees, just like in the regular, then the extra bold would look way too upright. So 15 degrees would look way more balanced. But then there is a new question. Why would people ever use an extra bold italic? And I think in my case, I'm going to use it mainly for, sorry, I need to breathe. So for the extra bold italic, I'm going to use it for speed and dynamic and emergency content. So I wanted the slam to be a bit dramatic because it's a pretty heavy extra bold italic anyway. A last problem occurred when you complete the design space. It needs to be cohesive and everything needs to work perfectly together. and there is no more place for improvisation. When you start with the regular, hey, it's the first master you draw, so you can do pretty much whatever you want. If you draw the extra bold, it's so different. You can also have some freedom. If you draw the italic, well, the construction is so different. You can go. But then with the extra bold italic, it needed to relate to the italic and the extra bold. So I took extra time to make sure that everything relates as much as possible in terms of proportions, counter size, counter position, contrast compensations, and other design details. And then I figured out that if you use the exact same recipe for the Roman and the italic, especially in the extra bold, it doesn't mean that the color is right. So here you can see that the extra bold italic and the bold italic are way too dark compared to the Roman companion. So I generated a few instances and I chose to decrease the extra bold italic of 15%, and I decreased the bold italic of 5%, so the color matched better the Roman. Anyway, so here is what I learned in TypeMedia. If you draw caps, please look at Renaissance proportions. It's gonna bring more variety to the whole picture. If you draw lower cases, make sure that it relates to the caps in terms of contrast, width, and weight. If you draw numbers, make sure that it relates to the thick and thins of the caps and the lower cases. If you draw an extra bold, don't just stretch the letters, but also compensate the contrast here and there. Prioritize the text color, please. If you draw an italic, just don't slant the Roman, change the construction, and make sure that this italic has its own voice and that it matches with the Roman. And if you draw an extra bold italic, make sure that it doesn't do its own thing. It has to work together with the extra bold Roman and the italic. So here is how it looks today. Probably after TypeMedia, I would love to explore Cyrillic for those 4 masters. Here is how hopefully it's gonna look in context. Here is how it looks outside of the hiking science context. Thank you everybody for listening. Moving on to the next person. Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you, Pauline. And coming up, Michael.
Hello, Eric. Can I start?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael, and I'm also going to show you my final project from TypeMedia. So at the beginning of second semester, we all get asked like pretty much what do we want to work on. And I was coming straight from bachelor's, so I did not have a lot of experience as some of my colleagues. So I knew I wanted to work on something more simple and definitely something that was a text typeface, but I also wanted something that will allow me to work on different styles. So I chose newspapers because I knew they're very complex typographic systems and they cover a lot of styles, but also they let me possibility to explore textiles, but also more interesting headline styles. So I started with collecting newspapers and looking in them, trying to research what kind of styles do they use inside, typographic treatments, and also I noticed that today newspapers are not so the technology allows much more variety in type design. Use of lightweights is more than normal, combination of different sans serif and serif typefaces. So it was a very fruitful ground to explore. It started, of course, with sketching, and first I went straight in quite early into digitization, but I noticed that it would be very hard to proof type just like this. So I knew that I needed more letters to kind of start setting type in newspaper context. But at this point, I did not really like this approach. So I tried different directions. One was sans serif. I wanted to explore headline styles to see if they could give me more direction and some clues for text style. And also I wanted to explore italic. That could also bring me to give me some clues for text. This was first iteration of sans serif. I wanted to explore grotesque models and news, like especially news Gothic, which I really liked. Then I went to exploration of display style, headline styles, and I had the idea that maybe like one system that could interpolate between pretty much three masters that could use different levels for different headline styles from news to more like magazine and lifestyle articles in newspapers. Third direction was italic style, which I got quite inspired during our trip to Berlin, and also like looking through Baroque models of Dutch typefaces, especially Enschede. And I started sketching, and sorry for the pixelation, I don't know what's going on. And I got to these versions, and I didn't really know what to do from there. I mean, how would that affect the text style? So I went back, and one of the main comments I got on my previous text style that it was too narrow. And so I decided to add weight and width to it. Also explore different terminals that I knew that they're going to give quite a lot of character to the typeface. But I was struggling a bit, and then finally one night I was sketching and I found that this could be the option for terminals. And this is the comparison between all the new version with all the differences in terminals. Serifs got more defined, and yeah, terminals and endings. Also, one of the most, like one of the things that I set up quite early that I knew I wanted through my research of newspapers was compact construction of capitals and numbers for better integration in text, large X height, and short descenders for efficient leading. So there would not be a lot of clashes when it's tightly leading. And from beginning, I was testing a lot, especially on different colors of paper to see if I could match the newspaper paper. Because like from our research in Revival during the first semester, we noticed how much impact does color of the paper have on type and contrast of it. These were some more. And pretty much that's when typeface got more defined with serif, terminals, width and weight. And also, at first I wanted to include this serifless leg on KNR, but in text it just caused a lot of problems, so I decided to keep it for headline styles and explore different options for text. Also, during the first sketching and first couple of iterations, I noticed that X height needed quite a lot of change for bold styles. So I decided to do a couple of quick explorations, extrapolations to find the right X height for bold so it could match the regular style. And I did the same for italic styles. I kind of ran into a problem with weight because when I started testing in layouts, my bold next to Roman, in shorter paragraphs looked okay, but when just one word or a couple of words needed to get emphasized, it looked too light. So yeah, you can see it here that it get quite lost. So I decided to extrapolate, but this time I didn't want to extrapolate just a bit. So to kind of run into this issue again in a couple of weeks, but I decided to go a bit further, and I decided to make this kind of black my master. And you can see here a comparison in text. and here as well. This is how it looked overview with light, medium, regular, bold, and medium and black styles together. And this is the final design space of the textiles. For italic, I tried quite a few options. I started with a very high contrast one on display that I ditched for display styles, and I wanted to see if I can use it for textile. So it got quite less wild and normalized. And also contrast were changed. I tried to match it more to the regular text. And also it features some stylistic sets for better integration in text or for more interesting shapes. And this is how it all looked like together. As I said, I decided to have quite shorter capitals and numbers for better integration in text, which also means shorter currency symbols. And this is the overview of numerals. I also decided to feature some case-sensitive forms because I think it's quite important, especially for newspaper titling. And this is a final, I mean, as it stands now, the character set of regular with, of course, diacritics and diacritics for bold. Together with Latin, I also wanted to explore Cyrillic. And this, I want to say thank you to Anya Danilo and Ilya Ruderman for their help with and their feedback on Cyrillic. So currently it features Ukrainian, Belarusian, and Russian and Serbian languages. And this is the overview of Cyrillic. And together with Latin, you can see it here. So quite important for me was to explore also the headline styles for newspaper setting, because I know it's basically quite important for newspapers. And I started with first sketches where I wanted to go from very thin to bold, also some other directions, but I was not very satisfied. I also tried some sans serif rotation of pen styles, but this looked very too much for tabloid and not for a serious newspaper, so I decided to ditch that. I returned back to the previously sketched italic to see if I can do something there. And at this point, I kind of decided to test all of them and see how they work in text. But I was not really satisfied how they looked in layouts. So I decided only to continue with regular weight. But from there, like you can notice in layouts, like it does not really have a punch. So I decided to go to kind of extremes with bold version and with this kind of hairline thin version, which I liked much more in layouts. It also got much narrower than before, and I also sketched a new version, which was kind of a condensed of it. So currently it features headline bold, bold condensed, and thin style. And this is a design space as of now. It has 4 weights in text with italic and 3 weights in 3 styles in headline. Overview of styles. And of course I made newspapers to show the typeface, how it works in actual layouts. And of course you need to have crosswords. And yeah, these are some slides showing typeface, how it works. With also diacritics and italic. And of course Cyrillic. And that would be all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. And we will conclude this presentation with Mint. Welcome.
How do you do? Oh.
Can you hear you? We can see you.
Hello, hi. Hello,
Go
can you
ahead.
hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay, okay. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. I think the camera is here. Okay. My name is Mint, like the herb or like the candy mint, and I'm from Bangkok, Thailand. I was working as a type designer at Katsan Dimak and a freelance lettering artist for a while before I moved to The Hague to do TypeMedia. So for the project, I'm doing a bilingual script typeface covering both Thai and Latin, and it's called Pristine. It all started when Rutherford from Mass Driver visited us at the studio in early February. He told us about this saying from a composer named Brian Eno. Are you an architect or a gardener? An architect stands for someone who plans and has a full picture of the work before it is made. And a gardener stands for someone who plants seed and waits to see what will come. I had a few attempts trying to be an architect, but that didn't work out. I just can't come up with ideas. Like all my classmates has really cool ideas and I just couldn't do that. So for my final projects, I decided to just start planting seeds in the garden. And I started sketching, like Ben Soin just said in TypeMedia story, and sketching, and sketching. And as I continued to sketch, these were some of the sketches that I had. And here I'll walk you through what comes through my mind and how I ended up at the final idea. So when I was sketching this, I wanted to do something very decorative. I thought of circus letters. And I know that for people coming from different backgrounds, we all have slightly different picture when we say circus. But to me, this is what comes to mind, somewhere between sign painting and wood type. And I thought Thai Tuscan serif sounds super cool. I was thinking of circus as an initial inspiration for styles. I wasn't thinking about a typeface that would be appropriate to use in a circus setting. And these are also references that relate to the picture I had in mind. I realize a lot of things. There are way more limitations in terms of construction to Thai script compared to Latin. The moment I drew this very first letter, I knew that Tuscan serif might not be the best idea. Whether it's loop or loopless style for Thai, we always need some sort of indication for the direction of the loop, which are loop faces in every direction. So this is extremely important for legibility. If this is not done right or it is not clear enough, characters can be very confusing between one another. And Tuscan serif is the serif facing in both directions. I mean, you can do a solution like in Latin where they did for the S, but then it will also affect the overall texture of typeface. So you can see here that I simplified the serif on the following characters. And there's this sketch. I was thinking about unusual combinations of parameters and constructions. Here it means like this letter construction is based on the true local Thai graphic design example, the truck stickers. If you refer to a truck sticker or a car quote sticker, every single Thai person knows exactly what category of typefaces you're talking about. And this is one of them. So when I was sketching, I thought using the same construction and give it a new voice by changing the contrast could be super interesting. And it was so nice to see such familiar construction in reverse contrast, but then I tried drawing Latin side by side and it gives such different flavor. And for the project, I wanted Thai and Latin to be able to use together in different contexts. So I thought a lot about the tone of voice of the project. And I just decided to continue sketching. So after I draw this, I realized I wanted to do something that is not low contrast bold. It has always been my favorite parameter to draw. It's so cute and so fun, but I wanted to do something I'm unfamiliar with. So after I sketches quite a few, I came up with these selected gardening tools. Display. After circus attempts, I knew I should turn it down a notch due to all the tie complications, but I still wanted to do display. And high contrast light because I wanted to get away from low contrast black. And something scripty italic would be a huge learning experience for me. So it ended up here. I thought it was interesting how the droplets here for Thai are actual parts of the characters when Latin is more or less like a sprinkle on top. It's a combination of soft organic shapes with sharp straight cuts. Then I started digitizing. Thai, Latin, and oh wow, the Latin is difficult. It's not easy to draw. It was very stiff in my first attempt at the H, as you can see, and it slightly got better with time. And now that I have a few characters, I thought, wait, what about the Roman? What would the Roman look like? After I sketched this Roman, I realized that the drops can be placed at multiple places, multiple ways. In this sketch, I thought serifs were too sharp. It creates too much of a contrast with the soft drops. And also, maybe I should add a bit more weight to the stems. So I decided to start a quick digitization and cut the serif off. So after I had the sans on screen, I still wondered what serif would look like. And it was interesting. And I added more characters for both the sans and the serif, and in both Latin and Thai. And I also tried a lighter serif version and then a lighter sans version. And then I wondered what if things are sharp instead of soft. It was fun, but I think I still preferred the softness and the friendliness in the beginning. So now that I have a few characters, combine them with the italics earlier and many rounds of proofs and correction, this is where it was. And then the italics matches more the Roman, and it became this. If I step back a bit and look at all the styles I have tried to that point, this is what I had. And then we went to Berlin. This is what I brought to the Berlin type crit. One serif, one sans, and one italics. And I knew at the moment that if I wanted to complete Thai as well, and I want the typeface to actually be typable, usable, functional, I needed to pick one and start somewhere. I decided to work with the sans. Now it's time to clean up things and starting with the control characters. I noticed something is off here. The horizontal weight on the top could be drawn much better. By much better, I mean the shoulders of the HMN construction is way too steep compared to the angle of the pen and the curve of the O. So I redrew both the O and the N, and here for a closer look. I made the proportions wider, more round, and less squarish, and add a bit more weight and contrast. It's also not just about the curves. I think the most prominent feature of the typeface would be these drops. And they can use a lot more love and attention right here. These can definitely be more refined. So this was before, and this is after. All the extremes on the drops are placed better, and some might say that moving a few units or two wouldn't make a difference. It does. It really does. And for Thai as well. Once something is edited and refined, it's like a domino effect. Like compared to the sketch in the beginning, I had to correct everything both in Latin and Thai. So this here and this is before and this is after the refinement. I also had this little swashy side quest because the typeface is meant to be a display face, so I thought having alternate caps would be fun. So I printed out words without caps from A to Z, and I realized that swashes aren't that easy to draw. And I also ended up realizing that not every characters need an alternate. Then I also wondered how things would look like a tiny bit lower contrast with a tiny bit serif added, something more pleasing to the eye, and there was one way to find out. I tried a very quick sketch of a less display version for both Latin and Thai. There are a lot of things that still needs to be refined if this is really going to be used as text. But it was nice to branch out a little bit and see the possibilities. This is going to be explored more in the future, but for now, this is what I have. Light, Latin, Thai, and italics. And that italic has come a long way. And to recap a little bit, this was how it looked like in the beginning, with all these weird fancy swashes that is not very practical. And this U that is trying so hard to implement some Thai construction, and it's also doing it on the entry stroke of the N, but for some reason it does not have an exit stroke. So I thought to myself that if it has an exit stroke, it would look way more natural. No, it does not look more natural. It's a very expensive feature, and it affects the whole texture of the typeface. And comparing to the Roman I had at that point, the italics became like a different typeface and also way too light in color. So, okay, let's step back a little bit. Now that was the Roman. So the first thing first, the most neutral italic, I'd say, would look something like this. And then not to let all the sketches go would look like this. If I want to push it to a very fancy extent, it could look like that. In the end, after rounds of testing and everything, I decided to go with something in between, like there. I actually really wanted to explore more fancy constructions, but then every time that I see it in use beside Roman, I just stop and question my decision every time. So I decided to prioritize the Roman right now. And this is how it looks together at the moment. Roman and italics. Then there's bold for both Latin and Thai. And now that we have the bold, we also have the weights in between, starting with the light as the master. So the name is pristine because pristine means mint, like pristine condition, mint condition, and light Thai. Regular, medium, and the bold. And yes, we are having our exhibition very soon. Come visit us. I regret not putting diacritics, numbers, and all the punctuations in the presentation because I do have them and I worked a lot on them. Thank you, Alexandra, for coming in and visit us and helped us with the Latin extended. And now I'll end the presentation with some of the examples of how the fonts can be used. Thank you. Thank you, TypeLab, for having us. And thank you, everybody, for your patience.
Thank you, Mint. This is all we have on offer for TypeMedia this year. I hope you enjoyed the presentations, all 13 of them. Thank you, Mint, Michael, Pauline, Fabio, Max, Jena, Ando, Ceci, Nina, Betsy, Felix, Hana, and Ben for all of your fantastic presentations. Thank you for watching. If you want to know more about TypeMedia, check typemedia.org. There's a website, and also kbk.nl will have lots and lots of information about the course. Thank you, Typographics, for making time and a place for us. Everybody visiting Typographics, enjoy the conference. Enjoy New York. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, people on YouTube. And that's all for Europe. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.